Morning, everybody. It's 9:30, and so I shall resume the inquiry. First things, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good, a smoother start than yesterday, so that's not so bad. So we heard the evidence of the council's highway witness, Ms. Backhouse, yesterday, and shortly we'll be going on to hear evidence from the council's highway witness a little later this morning. Just before I do that, a couple of points I wanted to make. First of all, I have received now the engrossed version of the legal undertaking, so thank you for sending that through. I think copies are hard copies are winging their way to the county and the district, so that's fine. I don't need a hard copy, but we will be discussing the document Thursday, so tomorrow I'll just flag up with the council that one of the questions I'll ask them is obviously, are they happy with that version, and are they happy with title as well? And because it's a slightly unusual situation, we've got two titles, as I understand. It's not only the site, but there's also the mitigation land as well. So I'll need to check both. The second point was that even though we didn't have any interested parties registered to speak at the inquiry, I didn't check to see whether any third party wanted to say anything about the highway issues yesterday afternoon. So I thought it only reasonable to give that opportunity this morning if there is anybody. Mrs. Page, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yes, we've received an email from Mr. Devine who attended yesterday. He has advised that he doesn't want actually to sort of physically participate, but he has raised a number of matters which I have forwarded on to the inspectorate, so they should be on their way to you. Or to read them out now. I didn't know what was best.
No, I don't think so. If they're winging their way to me, let me look at them first, and then I'll decide how we handle those.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for bringing up to date on that. So
I just ask Ms. Page that they're sent to the appellant insofar as they haven't already, and also to me. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Yes, please copy them. Okay, so are there any interested parties other than Mr. Devine who wishes to say anything on highway matters? No. Okay, good. Well, at least they've had the opportunity should they have wanted to do that. Okay, I'm just looking at either advocate. Is there any other housekeeping matters that have cropped up over the day? Mr. Warren.
Thank you, sir. I'm hoping my internet connection is a little bit more stable today. Fingers crossed. But I've got three short points on housekeeping. The first is, I'm assuming, unless you tell me otherwise, that you're still heading for probably an unaccompanied site visit on Monday. The reason for just checking at this stage is that were there to be any realistic possibility of you going on Friday, my clients would need to put certain things in place, or rather make sure certain animals aren't in place for you if you were going on Friday. I'm assuming, so that you're thinking at the moment, given progress and so on, is that it's still likely to be Monday?
I think so. I think it's probably best. Certainly, if the farmer's going to have to make arrangements to move his stock, it's better for him, I think, if I say keep it at Monday, and then he knows where he is.
If you're happy to do that, so that's very kind. And in terms of unaccompanied, I know, so that you'll wait until you've heard all the evidence just to make sure there's nothing that you need to anybody to be there to help with. So we can come back to that later. The second thing is the openings and so on went up on the council's website yesterday. We haven't been doing a separate inquiry document in inverted commas list, even though my instructing professionals have kept a little note of what's been going in. I take it so you're comfortable, given that there's not many documents, it would appear in this case, just to carry on the way we're going with things being put up at the top of the list?
Yes, I think that's fine.
Okay, thank you. And the third thing is, I sent my friend a quick email about this earlier on. We didn't mention it at the beginning yesterday, sir, but in terms of costs, we had a brief discussion about it at the CMC. I wasn't there, as you know, sir, but I think it was mentioned in passing then. It is at the moment quite likely that we'll make an application for costs. I've said to my learned friend that my suggestion would be, obviously subject to your preferences, sir, to deal with it in writing. And I mean, I was going to put our points pretty briefly down in writing tomorrow evening and let Mr. Defer have them tomorrow in writing. And then subject to what you and he thinks, to have an exchange just in writing rather than to have oral submissions at the inquiry on that.
Okay. Mr. Defer, what's your view on that one?
So I'm very happy to deal with it in writing, subject to you being happy with that as a way forward. Obviously, I will need a little bit of time to respond. Depending on what time I get them on tomorrow, I may be able to respond tomorrow night. I may just need a little bit of time after for example, Friday afternoon to do it. But subject to that, and obviously the appellant will then have a final word of reply on it, such as that might be necessary. But yes, I'm very happy to deal with it in writing if there is an application.
Mr. Warren, yeah, you weren't at the CMC, obviously, but I made the point that if there was an intention-made costs, obviously it's not a requirement, but it's certainly good practice to flag that up and do that before the start of the inquiry. Can you tell me why that route wasn't taken?
I think, sir, only by oversight. I can only apologise for it, sir. I think all of us rather went into yesterday. I was going to do it at the beginning yesterday, sir, but we just cracked on with the openings and the evidence rather more quickly than I thought. I know, sir, from having read the notes and hearing an account of what passed at the CMC, that it's not well, I hope it isn't a total surprise that that's what we're intending to do. So I can only apologise, sir. I think if I didn't make it clear yesterday morning that was the intent.
All right. However, we are where we are. So I have no objection to it being in writing. Obviously, there would be a right of reply if that. Let's have a think. Would you wish to do that in writing as well, or to do that verbally on Friday if Mr. Defer is able to respond in time?
Well, I'm in your hands, sir. I'll do whatever's most convenient to you. It might be better just to keep it all in writing, and it's quite possible that I won't exercise that right of final reply. The points are going to be fairly self-evident, and we'll have our say, and the council will have theirs, and then we'll leave it to you, sir. So I'll just reserve my position, and we'll see how we go. But my feeling is that if there is any need for a final word, then we'll just tack it on, and we may have to do that on Monday if you're prepared to allow that to come in on Monday.
On Monday, so I've got no problems. That won't throw me out. Okay. Well, I will await those documents to be submitted then, and obviously, Mr. Defer, once you've had a look at it, if you can reply in the normal way, and we will handle it in writing then.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes. That was the third thing. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Thank you for that, Mr. Defer. Did you have any housekeeping matters?
No, sir. None.
Okay, right. In which case, let us press on with the evidence in chief of Mr. Burbidge. Mr. Warren, please, would you call your witness?
Thank you very much indeed. I can see that Mr. Burbidge is with us. Good morning, Mr. Burbidge.
Good morning.
I'm going to introduce Mr. Burbidge, sir, by reference to page 5 of his main proof. And then if you're happy, bearing in mind where we are, not ask him to read out anything in particular, but just to go through some of the main points which appear still outstanding between us and the council. In terms of documents, we're very unlikely to stray outside the set of documents that we had yesterday with Ms. Backhouse. That's very kind, so thank you. So, Mr. Burbidge, your name is Clive Burbidge, is that right?
Yes, indeed.
And you're a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute, as well as a fellow of the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation and the Institute of Highways Engineers, and a chartered member of the Institute of Logistics and Transportation, as you tell us in paragraph 1.1. And is it still the case you're an equity director of Iceni Projects, Director of Transportation?
I am indeed, yes.
You tell us a bit about your 30 years experience, and also about your qualification with the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents as part of their road safety engineering certification, which you gained in 1995. Is that right?
That's true, yes.
Thank you very much. I mentioned that obviously specifically in relation to the matters which are outstanding between the main parties. So with that out of the way, could we structure these points in chief in this way? I'd like to ask you about some of the nuts and bolts, if you like, what was taken into account in the assessments, speeds, numbers of turning movements and that kind of thing, just to make sure there's no doubt about that. And then we'll look at the deceleration lane, pedestrians crossing at B, and then the two manoeuvres. Okay. And so first of all, could we just pick up this point again, which I think is still in play, if you like, about the extent to which the scheme was put forward or designed or assessed on the basis of it all being 30 miles an hour, the speed limit being changed. Would you just touch on that point for us?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's very clear and very evident, we went through that yesterday, that the transport assessment at the time of the application submission very clearly stated a number of locations that the speed limit, there was an intention to move the speed limit, but everything within the assessment that had been done and put forward to the county council was done on the basis that the 85th percentile speeds of the road were used. Those.
I'm sorry, Mr. Burbage, to interrupt you, but you sound like you're at the bottom of a well. Now, that's just your microphone. I'm starting to lose some of the front ends of some of the sentences. I wonder whether there's anything that you can do to improve matters.
Is that any better, sir, if I move nearer?
I think it probably is. Yes, good.
Okay,
thank you.
Sorry, hopefully I'm not too intimidated then. Sorry, I'll start again then. So the county council's, the submission to the local planning authority, which was of the county council, included a transport assessment. That transport assessment makes it very clear that although there was an intention or a desire to move the speed limit, all the work that had been undertaken, design, the parameters, modelling, everything had been done on the basis that the speed limit remained as it is and that the speed of the road was as recorded within the 85th percentile speed. Those 85th percentile speeds that it's been designed to is summarised for ease at page 8 of my proof of evidence. And in design, you tend to use wet weather speeds. So just to be clear, that's 40 mile or 40.2 would be an absolutely precise eastbound, which would be coming out of the village, and 42.2 coming westbound, which is into the village.
Okay, just pausing there, Mr. Burbage. Sorry, I have to say I'm myself you're still dropping in and out slightly. It may just be an issue with the mic, I think. I don't know whether there's anything else you can do. You haven't got any headphones or anything like that.
I haven't. I can switch computers.
No, I don't think that'll be necessary. I think as long as there's nothing in the way of the mic papers or documents or anything like that on the is it an internal microphone to the laptop?
It is internal. I'll move the keyboard for it. Here we go.
I think that might help. It's funny, sir, because in discussions online that we've been having as a team, I haven't necessarily had this problem talking to Mr. Burbridge. So it's a combination, I think, of the tech there and the platform coming through the platform.
Sorry, is that any better? Is it where I've had keyboard in the way, perhaps?
It might be, yeah. I'm just take it quite slowly.
I will indeed.
Yes, thanks. I'm sorry, Mr. Burbage, to add a further burden on you in giving the evidence, but thank you very much. Okay, so what was taken into account? Would you just do those speeds again for us? The wet weather, because I lost a couple of them.
Yes, certainly. So it's page 8 of my evidence, and the relevant speeds are 40.2 miles per hour eastbound, coming out of the village, and 42.2 westbound coming into the village.
Yeah,
that's what was agreed with the local, local highway authority. Those are the speeds that everything's been designed.
Thank you. In terms of the guidance that was used when, I know it wasn't your firm, but when the now appellants highways consultants were doing the application and the TA, was it assessed on the basis, the access is assessed on the basis of manual for streets or on the basis of DMRB guidance?
It was assessed on DMRB, but with bearing in mind this is guidance, trunk roads normally used, and that does allow the interpretation of the local authority, highway authority, to relax those standards where it feels appropriate. So it was done on DMRB as guidance, but it does allow relaxation.
Yeah. Thank you. And one connected point of fact, really, at the back of your appendices, I think it's Appendix 2. Yes. You've reproduced for us the access drawing 0001P7. Yeah. If you've got that to hand, thank you. If you've got that, sir, I just want to take you in that drawing to the annotation which is attached to the gateway feature. So it says it's obviously to the east of the proposed access. There's a feature in the road, and then there's an arrow, and it says possibility, move TRO and introduce a new gateway feature subject to separate consultation process following planning application. Can you just be clear for us, Mr. Burbridge, about whether, first of all, whether a gateway feature, not the speed limit change, but a gateway feature is part of the proposal?
A gateway feature is part of the proposal, and I should just be very clear. In Mrs. Backhouse evidence yesterday, she said this drawing showed the relocation of speed limit, or required it. It doesn't, as you just read out. It says possibility. So it's never relied upon on this drawing either. So the drawing itself does not rely on the speed limit change.
No, indeed. Okay. So possibility of a TRO, but gateway feature part of scheme. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Now, that was the first set of points about 30 miles an hour and so on. Second set of points about the busyness of the road, if you like. A number of times Ms. Backhouse said, oh, it's a busy road, and she referred to 7,000 movements a day and so on. I mean, first of all, DMRB, what kind of roads, strictly speaking, is that aimed at?
DMRB is aimed at trunk roads. It was written for trunk roads, and actually, perhaps if I could take you to page 19 of my evidence, if I may, start with.
Page 19. Yeah.
Yeah. I may paragraph 411.
Mm-hmm.
And the first part of that says DMRB provides requirements which shall be applied to the appraisal, design, maintenance, operational, and disposal of motorway and all-purpose trunk roads. And in this case, the overseeing authority was Highways England. Now it's National Highways. You go to the last part of that quote, which I've underlined. It says, where DMRB requirements are applied to other roads, the specific highway or local road authority, this case the county council, acting as overseeing organisations, shall decide on the extent which the requirements are appropriate in any given situation. Now, I think that's very important, because the trunk roads are mainly to get from A to B fast, relatively fast, unencumbered. So it's about the movement, free flow of traffic safely and quickly between parts A and B. It's not to serve developments off it with numerous junctions joining it, etc. It's about the transition of A to B for vehicles. When you come off a trunk road, you look to come off at relative, that's why you have slip roads, deceleration lanes, and the rest. You look to come off at relatively reasonable speed so as not to hold up the traffic behind and have to brake. When you start applying DMRB to local situations, urban roads like this, you need to remember it's completely different character. What you're serving is local developments where you expect to slow down because there's driveways, in urban areas. There's accesses left, right, and centre, and you slow on the road, and you expect to see people slowing on the road to make manoeuvres, turn into their own private drives, turn into right turn lanes, and that's the difference where you need to take those characters into consideration. Flows are also completely different. I mean, trunk roads usually, not always, have tens of thousands of vehicles. We're not talking about that here. This is a very low traffic road. And if I can just put it in context, the peak flow into the village in the AM peak is 433 vehicles, and turning into our site in the AM peak is 6 vehicles. In the PM peak, it won't change much, and the turning into the site, we basically doubles. It's 14, 15 vehicles turning into our site. If we can look at the flows with Two-Gate Meadow as well, in the AM peak, you're talking 2-3 vehicles turning. They were physically recorded, just 2 to 3 vehicles. In the PM peak, it's 8 vehicles. So we're talking a completely different character of road. I think we need to remember that, because that's why the DMRB specifically said where it's used outside trunk road, the county or the OC authority have the right and should interpret it as it feels appropriate.
Yes, and just picking up on one point on Two-Gate Meadow, you just referred to a low number in relation to turning movements into Two-Gate Meadow itself. I had an exchange with Ms. Backhouse yesterday, if you remember, based on what's contained within the TA about checking, if you remember that. Could we just revisit that and just identify, because she was uncertain, I think, or maybe she wasn't uncertain, she didn't think herself that related to the full hour. And I wonder whether you might just clarify that for us.
Yes, certainly. I can say it does, but probably the best way is to actually demonstrate it. So it's CD 28 we were dealing with yesterday.
That's it. Yeah.
And it was page 30. I believe she took you to of
the spot check paragraph in the centre.
Yeah, 6.3.4, and it was table 6.4 she was using.
Yes. Just wait until everyone's there. Just give us a moment.
Sorry, yes, sorry.
So CD 28, page 30, 6.3.4.
30. That's right. Find it. Yes, I'm there.
Thank you. Yes, fire away, Mr. Beveridge.
Thank you. So if you actually look at the paragraph above, 6.3.4, it says on the second line up from the bottom, Two-Gate Meadows were these are the surveys, undertaken on the 22nd and 27th of January 2020 during the AM and PM peak hours. Clearly says it's the hour. So these are hours, and there would be no reason why you would do part of an hour as a spot check. The spot check is the hour. It's ludicrous to assume anything different.
Yeah.
But it clearly says it there, peak hour.
Thank you. So we've covered business of the road, numbers on the main line, and turning movements, if you like, into the site access and to Two-Gate Meadow. Speeds, thirdly, we have those speeds, wet weather, 85th percentile speeds you gave us earlier. Ms. Backhouse said yesterday that, particularly in relation to a couple of the design standards, that one should, at the very least, have regard, or indeed perhaps apply the speeds that were recorded in the ACT speed survey in the future with the scheme in place. So would you offer a response to that as an approach?
Well, the design has taken into account the actual speeds of the road that were recorded. So that is exactly what the submission says. That's what's acknowledged by the County Council in the Statement of Common Ground as well, and in various correspondence with them. So the road has been designed to take into account the speed of the road, of the vehicles along the road. Nevertheless, County and myself both agree, in all likelihood, speeds will reduce as a result of these works, because it stands to reason, as soon as you start to urbanise a road in terms of new footways, lighting, bollards in the road, islands in the road, two right turn lanes, you start to urbanise the road and change the character of it from rural with two hedges each side. Immediately drivers respond to that. Drivers respond and behave according to the surroundings around them. They don't always, I'll be honest, take account of the speed limit. If it says 30 and it doesn't feel like a 30, you find speed of vehicles do a lot more than 30. If it says 30 and the road is a character of 30 or 20, they respond accordingly. And drivers do two things. One, there are those that adhere to the speed limit. There are those that just drive in accordance with what they see around them. And the fact that we're urbanising this in terms of the characteristics in it means I'm not going to say for 1 minute they're going to drop to 30, because I don't know what they're dropped to. But I do know they will realistically drop to speed. And Miss Backhouse is right. The initial drop is usually greater, but I don't believe for 1 minute it'll return to as it is now. It will return. It will go down, then it'll creep up fractionally if it follows normal characteristics. But it should be a reduced speed on the road beyond the 40 and 42 that we were just talking about. Nevertheless, the design takes account of what the speed is now. So anything beyond that is an improvement.
There's one particular point I just wanted to pursue on that, Mr. Burbridge, and that's the effect of, if one is leaving Overton going in an eastbound direction, of those who might be turning into the site access, or indeed turning into Two-Gate Meadow, on other drivers who are behind them, if you like, coming out of the village.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that almost goes back to my point about how you apply DMRB and its different characteristics between the urban area and the fact that it's a trunk road. I struggled to understand where Mrs. Backhouse was coming from the other day, because people don't go along at 40 mile an hour, the recorded ATC speed, assuming they don't slow down any further and they carry on at that speed. They don't go along and then suddenly whip into the right turn lane. It just doesn't happen. We're not on a motorway here where people slip off quickly onto deceleration lanes and then start to slow down. What happens is you've got your turn coming up, you slow down as you're going, and you're going uphill at this point. So you slow down, you indicate to turn right, and you enter that taper and then the right turn lane at a reduced speed, appropriate for the junction. It's normal driver behaviour. The car behind doesn't have to brake suddenly. It can see the indicator on, see your brake lights slowing down, or you take your foot off the clutch, foot off the accelerator, so you're slowing down without braking, and it will reduce speed accordingly. So it's a normal urban environment where vehicles would make that manoeuvre, move into the right turn lane, and that's been fully taken into account when the County Council reviewed the design. They felt it was appropriate that the tapers and deceleration lane of the right turn lane, given there's absolutely no queuing in the right turn lane anyway, is appropriate for the 40 mile an hour design.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to the deceleration lanes specifically and the points that are still maintained, I think, by Ms. Backhouse in a moment. Just finishing off on this first section, the work that JTA did and put before the County Council on probability, in other words, when we're going to come to these, the probability of there being cars in the locations, which may lead to temporary or transient obstruction of visibility. Now, I know that you've looked at that work. It wasn't yours. Do you have any additional comment on what the inspector should make of that probability work that the county received?
Well, I think it is important. And again, this is where I fundamentally disagree with Mrs. Backhouse, where she says that I believe, I'm going to paraphrase, but I believe she said yesterday was the effect that the probability wasn't a consideration. If it was a risk, it was a risk. Well, I have to say I fundamentally disagree, because if the probability is something there nearly 99.9% of the time, that's a permanent obstruction. If the probabilities there, it's once on a blue moon or never there. Effectively, that's not even an obstruction. And DMRB does allow for obstructions within the visibility for two interrelated junctions in any effect. So it is accepted you can have interruptions. With regard to, the probability,
Yes.
the previous work that was done suggested these events were, if I can, maneuver one, which we know was 1 in 20,614 occurrence event. In the PMP was 1 in 3,703. Maneuver 2 was similar in terms of it was 1,362 in the AM, and one event in 3,150. All, but those are just numbers. I think we can put this a lot more simplistic. I think the maximum time a car, so our site, it will take longer to turn into our site, twice as many vehicles as Two-Gate Meadow. So our site's worse to turn in. You'll wait at our site longer, probability, because you've got more that got maneuver, but they still turn up. Won't be massively. The modelling clearly shows that the time you wait, the maximum time any one of those 6 vehicles in the AM peak wait, less than 6 seconds. It was 5.94 seconds, the maximum time any one vehicle wait. So that obstruction to some of those manoeuvres, manoeuvre 1 and manoeuvre 2, where it involves our site access, that's 5.94 seconds that obstruction occurs for if we don't move that vehicle, and then before it turns into sight, and it'll be slightly less than the other. So I think rather than talk about 1 in 3,000 event and 1 in 20,000 event, we're talking seconds. That's what we're reality are talking, and no doubt we'll go through each of those maneuvers in detail.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Backhouse in her evidence makes some points about potential additional flows or additional complexity that she says were modelled and may affect the numbers, for instance, that you've just given us in part. I know that you deal with this in the rebuttal, so I don't want to ask you about it in great detail, but do you think that the flows, for instance, on the main line, on the B3400, would be different if one accepted Ms. Backhouse's points about the 50 additional houses at Overton Hill or the school extension? So
if we just accept Backhouse's argument and just go for it, I did actually remodel it with 100 vehicles in either direction, which was something significantly more than Mrs. Backhouse was even suggesting. Yeah. I actually say that made a difference of so where I quoted the turn into the site was 5.94 seconds, changed to the maximum was 6.27 changed to, adding 100 vehicles on the main road in either direction. So I don't accept the additional vehicles at 100 in either direction as even being realistic. I think possibly it was overestimated. Second best guess is it was done correctly. Third, I'm not being funny, we've added 100 in either direction, which I would hope everyone would accept is more than ever be dreamed of, and that makes an insignificant difference, about 0.3 of a second.
Yes, and there obviously you're referring to the work that you carried out in the rebuttal proof, aren't you?
I am, yes.
And we've got that in the appendix to the rebuttal proof, and you deal with it in section 2, I think, don't you, of your rebuttal proof?
Bear with me, please.
That's on pages 4 and 5 of the rebuttal.
Yes, I do. Yes, indeed I do.
Okay, and we've got the numbers obviously in the in appendix A1 for the turning. Okay, so what about a slightly more how should I put it, a slightly different kind of point that Ms. Backhouse makes, which is it's very complicated. You know, this set of movements with two-gate meadow and the site access and the sports facility and nursery on the other side of the road. And therefore, she says, because it's complicated, you may have underestimated waiting times and therefore the length of time that there's an obstruction. What do you say to that?
I don't think it's complicated at all. Could I take you, please, to my appendices of my proof of evidence?
Yes.
And it's probably easier to talk around the drawing that we keep referring back to, the 001 P7.
Yes.
On the last page, if that's all right, because that's got the axes on, if I may. Gives everyone a chance to find that page.
Got you. Yeah. I'll just mute while we're waiting so that you can't hear the hooting at the petrol station queue just down the road, which is an enjoyable backdrop that I've got.
I'm there if everybody else is.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So if I could just talk from left to right, we've got obviously the first right turn lane is the access to two-gate meadow. In the middle, we've got the access to the site via a right turn lane. Then there's a shaded grey ingress to the north, just beyond the last most easterly pedestrian island, or the island. That access is the sports fields, etc. I should say that is in only, so they can't turn out there, which I think was referred to yesterday. They might turn out near the junction, but they can't turn out there. That's ingress only. And then if you keep going along, hard to see, but where the gateway is shown on there, just before the gateway feature, there's another bell mouth, and that's the egress. So the egress from that site is a long way away. So if we were to deal with this now as three junctions, firstly, the county council didn't actually think these needed modelling. The flows are so light, it's ridiculous. You don't need to model it. Secondly, I do agree, junctions next to each other do have an effect and interact on each other. Sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive. In this case, it would actually probably have a positive effect on the capacity in terms of making life easier. And the reason I say that is, if you were to turn right into the sports pitch, that vehicle turning right will hold up the vehicles behind it. The minute it does that, it creates a greater gap in the traffic and allows more right turn movements into two gate and into our site. So if we were to model these together, we would actually create extra opportunities for right turning. Bearing in mind, the maximum time already rates is 5.98 seconds, 5.94 seconds. I mean, we're talking ridiculous times to get in and out of the site. So I think it's important that, one, you don't need to model these together. Any competent engineer, which the county council are, can clearly see that the interaction has a positive effect. You don't need to model it because the number of movements is so small, it's insignificant. That's the point.
Thank you very much. I want to turn then to just pick up the three sections of points that I think are maintained by Ms. Backhouse. The first one we can deal with quite briefly, I think, Mr. Burbridge, and that's the deceleration lane. We can stay with that drawing, actually, P7 that you were just taking us to. Again, I think the point that Ms. Backhouse makes is that if you're approaching this on the basis of speeds, that one should be looking at 40 miles an hour, which leads to a 50-meter guidance measurement on the deceleration lane, and we've got 36, and she says that's substandard and unacceptable. Now, what do you say about how much space should be provided when you're looking at the application of the guidance in these factual circumstances?
It goes back to what I said originally, that the county council have as the overseeing authority, should interpret the MRB as they see appropriate to the local circumstances. And there's two fundamental points here. One, we don't have a high flow of traffic on the main road, and significantly, we don't have vehicles queuing in the right turn either. So every vehicle that arrives can turn easily within seconds. So you don't need great big long stacking, queuing, tapers to get into it. So the local highway authority have taken the view that although, as Ms. Backhouse rightly points out, if you measure it, that's more in accordance with a 30 than a 40 limit. They've taken the view that the reduced DMRB design in this area is appropriate for a 40-mile-an-hour recorded speed. So they've taken that view. I share that view because, as I said earlier, as people come up the hill, they slow before they make the manoeuvre into a right turn. What's the point in having another
19, I think it is.
19, thank you.
Oh, no, it's less than that. It's 14, isn't it now? 50. 36 up to 50.
Yeah. 14. What's the point in having another 14 metres of additional tarmac in the middle of the road when we've only got one car at a time turning into it? You just don't need it. There's absolutely no point. You've got plenty of time to slow coming up the hill. And if we're being honest, you've got plenty of time to slow within the right turn lane as well. So you just don't need it. And I think the county, the original design by PJA and the county's view on it is quite correct, that it's not necessary. And the road safety audit didn't raise any issues either.
Yes. And in terms of the kind of, as it were, strictly speaking, the operation of the guidance, if you want to start with that, I asked Ms. Backhouse about the extent to which you should be using speed limits rather than recorded speeds. Do you remember, as if one looks at the table, we don't need to go back to it, that she's extracted from DMRB. What is the speed limit up until the point when you're inside the deceleration lane?
So the speed limit for the first right turn is all within the 30.
Yeah.
And for the approach to the second right turn starts within the 30 and then moves to the 40. It was interesting. Mrs. Backhouse also said that speed limit couldn't stay there yesterday in evidence, and I'm not quite sure what she meant by that or where it should go. So if it doesn't stay there, logically it would move to the gateway, but I would leave that to others to interpret.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it where it is now, I think.
Yes, so am I. I've assumed it stayed, and that's what all the work's been done on.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. I don't think I need to ask any more about the deceleration lane point. Pedestrian safety, just before we get there, a very short point, which isn't really about safety, about connectivity that I asked Ms. Backhouse about. Just say a word with you, would you, about connectivity between the appeal site and the facilities in the middle of Overton, and whether that's acceptable or substandard or whatever you think.
Yes, certainly. Just trying to think the best way to describe this. Probably
we can look at your proof, can't we? Oh, the rebuttal.
Proof or rebuttal?
No, rebuttal page 9, I think, is probably a sensible.
Yes, that's helpful. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So if everyone's got my rebuttal page 9.
Yes, I'm there.
Thank you. We've got, it's not, obviously it's not clear here where the station is, but the station can be got to from, if you look at the drawing under 3.7, there's, I assume we all know Overton Hill up there.
Yeah.
Overton Hill. So that you can get to the station up there, or you can go obviously further down the road to the station road itself, which is where the end of Route 2 is shown as finishing.
Yes.
So if I drop now to my drawing below, figure 3.4.
Yes.
I think it's this is where it's important to understand the movements. I believe we've all now agreed that the footpath width are adequate both on the main road and through the estate along through Gate Meadow. So I believe that has now all been agreed and is covered in on the ground. Yes, then the movement from our site, I'll deal with our site first, will logically take one of two accesses, either through the emergency access, which is the most eastern of the violet line I've drawn, or more than likely the majority will take the western one because that serves the majority of our site layout. So as most of the people wouldn't go back on themselves to turn and go the other way. So you would take that access there. Irrespective of which one you take, it's quicker to walk through the estate to the bus stop where I'll show the bus stop. And then if you want to go up Overton Hill to the station, cross at the island there and up the hill, rather than go back on yourself to our new junction or to the Overton or Toogate junction and then go along the main road. So for our estate, it is far quicker for all movements, apart from the sports ground, go through the Toogate Meadow estate. With regard to Toogate Meadow, it's even quicker for them to do that than go back out. Because if you look on my drawing, you can see the eastern half of Toogate Meadow is actually greenery. So you've actually got to go, if you live in the Toogate Meadow, which is about 39, 40 properties, I think it's 39 properties, you've got to walk back on yourself back towards our junction to use those islands or to use the road and the new infrastructure we're putting in, then walk down the road to Water Station or the local facility. So I think it's important to say it's not just the local facilities. I think for everything you could possibly want to use in Overton, pretty much you would go through the estate and you would not go back towards the junction. So we just need to put this in context because that also affects when we come on to other things about safety map, the number of movements. So we talk about car movement, we need to put this in perspective of the number of pedestrian movements as well. So
Yes.
it's not realistic people would go back that way. I will expect, and I would expect those using the sports ground in that area to use those islands. I would expect that, and that's why they've been put in there to benefit those.
Yes. So I mean, let's turn to that. I'm looking at P7 actually for this purpose, though it might be worth having that open as well, Mr. Burbridge, as page 24 of your main proof of your rebuttal proof.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, page 24 of your rebuttal proof. No, I beg your pardon. I'm so sorry, Mr. Burbridge. Page 24 of your main proof. Forgive me. Okay. Just have those two available to you, would you? And I'm just we all know from yesterday and from reading and so on where the westerly crossing by Toogate Meadows proposed. That's that point B. Do you remember that Miss Backhouse refers to in her evidence? And she was focusing on those who were crossing the road from north to south towards Toogate Meadow.
Yes.
Do you remember? So on your on the basis of what you've just been saying, those who may have been coming back, as it were, from the sports ground or from the nursery.
Yes. Yes, but for B, that would only be those from the sports ground or the nursery to Toogate Meadow area.
To Toogate Meadow,
it
yes.
wouldn't be to our site because they'd use the eastern one.
Indeed. So just those who are going to Toogate Meadow, yeah. Okay, so a good handle on amounts and frequency and so on from that. Let's take the safety point then next. Those who are waiting, who've crossed over because there's no issue about visibility or blind spots, etc. The northern carriageway, if you like, the eastbound carriageway, and are standing in the newly provided refuge, if you like, between the lit bollards, looking left. First of all, how often, when they look left, is there likely to be a car turning into Toogate Lane, into the new access?
Well, it's incredibly infrequent. In the worst case peak, which would be the PM peak, which logically would not be the peak when we've also got the most amount of pedestrians as well. The pedestrians are not likely to be crossing the nursery at the same at coinciding with the worst case peak with PM. Right? We have about 14, 15 vehicles, so over the hour. So that's all we have.
And on the basis of what you were saying earlier, let's take 15, each of those 15 vehicles are there for roughly how long?
That peak wasn't modelled, but it will be very similar. it's going to be around the 6 seconds again. It's because the main flows and that don't dramatically change and the rest in terms of opportunity. So it will go up, like 6.5, but we're not talking big numbers.
Okay, so you're. I want you to put yourself wearing your safety qualifications hat, if you like, as a pedestrian. You've crossed over and you're standing there looking, and it is one of those occasions when there's a car attempting to turn right. First of all, what are the sight lines and the geometry actually like for somebody standing there looking eastward?
So they'll be able to see beyond the 80 meters of the car.
Just hold on.
Up the road.
We lost you for a second there. So let's just go back to the, forgive me, it's not your fault. Just go back to the beginning of the answer. So what would it be like in terms of sight lines for the pedestrian?
So they will be able to see beyond the 80 meters down the road for a car approaching.
So where would they be looking? Imagine looking, the car is there. Would that 80 meters be on the left of the car or the right of the car?
They'd be on the left of the car waiting to turn. And then they'll be able to see the junction itself quite clearly, anyone turning in or out of our new junction. So they'd be able to see those maneuvers very safely. I'd like to assume that cars in that blind spot, the pedestrian would have the nous to wait, particularly seeing if the car is waiting to turn into our site, there must be a car approaching logically. Or there's going to be an obstruction to stop that. So most people are quite sensible. And let's put this in context again. By the time you've paused, perhaps looked down for your child that we were talking about yesterday and looked up again, that car's already turned out of that right turn lane anyway. We're talking 6 seconds, 7 seconds, 5 seconds. I would guess the maximum in the peak is 6.5, as I said. So we haven't got to wait very long. You can see in advance of it, you can see in front of it, you can see the junction of our road very clearly. People aren't silly, they know if a car's waiting, there's a car coming, and chances are they can see it themselves.
And just tell me, sorry, Mr. Burbage, sorry, I beg your pardon, sorry.
I was going to say there's a very small blind spot where they can't see it, and that car will move through that area very quickly. So when you first arrive, it might be in that blind spot, and then it would appear very quickly. After that, you'll see it approaching the blind spot, so you'll know it's there anyway. You'll know the car's there.
So just give us a sense. I mean, the inspector will no doubt work this out, but in terms of speeds there, let's even assume that people are slowing. Let's not, take a slightly more advantageous kind of 40-mile-an-hour speed, if you like, coming towards the viewer there. Let's say 30. If a car is traveling at 30 miles an hour through that blind spot, how long does it take to get through the blind spot? How long would it be hidden for?
Oh, you put me on the spot there. I'd have to do the math, but I guess it's about it's 1.7 seconds for 40 mile an hour, 1.7 meters for 40 mile an hour. So it's probably about 2.5 meters for every second for 30. Probably, I'd have to do the maths, but it's let's just say a couple of meters every second.
So how long roughly would it be hidden for?
That distance is looking at to be about 30, that's 80, about 25 meters. So 25 divided by 10 seconds.
Something like that. Yeah. Okay.
That sounds too much, but yeah.
Do you want to have a think about that and come back?
I'll have a think and come back to you on that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you need to think about that. Come back.
Yeah, have a think about
the maths.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We can see obviously on the drawing what, as it were, the area of the blind spot might be. So you have a think about how quickly it would take a car moving at 30 to go through that area. Fine, we can come back to that, Mr. Burbage. You don't need to do it now unless you want to.
But I was still on about the pedestrian crossing at point.
Yeah, the pedestrian crossing. Yeah. Okay. I haven't asked you about lights and so on, or being able to see through the turning vehicle. I've taken those points up with Mr. Baxter.
Just give me literally 2 seconds. I'll just.
Yes, of course. Yeah, by all means. I'm so sorry, Mr.
Just very quickly. We'll just finish this point off.
Yeah.
So if it was a 40 mile an hour, it would be probably about 12 seconds. And if it was 30, I'd have to do maths, but it'd be less than 12 seconds. But bearing in mind, the car, if the car wasn't coming, the car's going to be turning. The average car, the maximum car time at wait, only, what was it? 5.94 seconds at arriving.
All right, thank you very much.
I'm still uncertain about that. I mean, Miss
Yeah.
Burbage, you might want to, when we get we're going to have a break, I think, probably at the end of your evidence. You may want to take another look at that. I mean, I'm not a highway engineer myself, but 10 seconds sounds longer than I was anticipating. So
That's to me as well, sir. But
yeah, either we've learned something or there's something wrong in the math. So I just want to be clear on that point, I think.
yeah,
Well, let's come back to you, Mr. Burbage. Just take a moment on that at the end of what we'll do, sir, is we'll, no pun intended, park that point until the end of the examination in chief, Mr. Burbage, and then you can come back after the little break. Okay. So that's all other than the two movements, the two other movements. And have you still got your page 24 open?
I have, yes.
In your proof, because you've done an exercise there, helpfully, with some shading and so on, which is of assistance in understanding the extent of this transient interruption of view. So let's, first of all, I just want to touch on the point that you mentioned about 10 minutes ago, which is you said that if one's applying DMRB, DMRB allows some interruption of visibility. Do you just want to touch on that again before we look at the two factual situations?
Yeah, certainly. So if you turn to page 23
Yes,
of
your
my proof of evidence,
yeah.
see that I've quoted the DMRB standards there, and these are in the notes at the beginning. It says, new priority junctions will not be cited where they encroach on the visibility requirements of adjacent priority junctions on major roads with a speed limit, and these are speed limit of 40 miles per hour, greater than 40 miles an hour, sorry. We haven't got greater than 40 miles an hour, we've got a speed limit of 40 or 30, depending on which part of the design you're taking. A speed limit of 40 miles per hour, which we are, or less, so that we tick that box, but where the minor road falls part of a through route, it doesn't, it's a cul-de-sac. So,
Yes.
so that's when you don't allow the encroachment on visibility. And again, that's all to do with the additional movements, the additional risks and the rest. So where you've got a 40 mile an hour road serving cul-de-sacs, it's perfectly acceptable to have encroachment on visibility. DMRB says that.
Yes. Good. Thank you very much. So that's it. That's a helpful point about us applying, if you like, the guidance. But just turn to the facts here again. Then movement number, famously already on day 2 of the inquiry, movement number 1, maneuver number 1.
Yeah.
So I've drawn little cars onto P7, to be honest, but you can do it on your shaded diagram as well, where you've got the purple, if you've got the color version of it, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, purpley color. What does the purpley color represent?
So the purple shows the visibility that can be seen. So the first manoeuvre that was raised as a concern by the county council that they needed to be addressed was how the vehicle would wait to turn into Two-Gate Meadow, and
Yes.
whether or not it would be obstructed by the vehicle turning into our site.
Yes. So whether it could see westbound cars coming properly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so firstly, I would say we've got to go back to the fact that a car only sits there for seconds in that right turn, obstructing that visibility anyway.
Yeah.
Secondly, it's almost impossible, I've tried it, to place a car in that grey area that's the blind spot. It's almost impossible if you look on the drawing and imagine a car, to place it in there. only got to move forward or backwards a fraction, and it's all of a sudden visible again.
When you say place the car, Mr. Burbridge, do you mean one of the oncoming westbound cars?
Yeah, if I was to almost pick up a car and put it there, it's that grey area is just about big enough to obscure a car. If it moves backwards or forwards a fraction, it can be seen. So for, we're not even talking a second here, a split second, it vanishes, but you can clearly see it approaching in advance. You can clearly see it coming beyond it. Obviously, if the car's waiting to turn right and it's not going to be turning right into our sight for waiting very long, you know a car's approaching anyway. So I really don't actually see the issue with manoeuvre one, because one, we've gone through all the maths of how infrequent it is, or the previous consultant had. But
yes.
Secondly, we can see in reality that you can see that car and it only vanishes for a minuscule point.
Thank you. Manoeuvre 2, your lower illustration after 4.3.7 of your proof. So there we've got the emerging right turner, if you like, from the site access, having his or her visibility interrupted by the right turner into Tugate Meadow. Yeah.
Yes.
And we can see there in grey, if you like, an area where that visibility is interrupted, and purple where you can still see. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So here it would suggest that a car coming up the hill is hidden for longer.
Yes.
So visibility is measured along the curve, the near side curves. So and you don't measure normally to the middle of the road or to the approaching traffic. So despite if you're looking to your left, turning out of an access, the cars are normally on the other side of the road. However, you always measure to the near side, because you've got to assume a car could be overtaken and using the other side of the road. That's why you do the measurements that way. I think here we need to look at the practicalities of it again. So if a car is waiting in Tugate Meadow to turn right, firstly, it's going to be there less time than it would have been turning right into our site. So it's only there a fraction of time. So we pull up at our junction to pull out of our junction, and you've only got to wait fractionally, a few seconds, and the car will have probably moved into Tugate Meadow. Secondly, if you're looking there at that obstruction, the visibility to the far side of the car, to the approaching traffic, is 85.4 meters. If the traffic speed doesn't reduce, which I believe it will, but if it doesn't reduce, according to the design criteria for the recorded 85th percentile speeds, we need 94 meters. So we're 10 meters short. Now, I think that's a point worth bearing in mind, because on this occasion, there's no harm in measuring visibility to the opposing carriageway on the opposite side, although that's not normal convention. And the reason I say that is you can measure to the opposing carriageway on the other side where you've got, say, an island in the road, prevents people overtaking. Here, if we get this situation of manoeuvre 2 occurring, we're going to have a car in the road waiting to turn right. So nobody's going to be going around a car waiting to turn right. They're not going to be overtaking on the wrong side of the road by the car. So it's perfectly reasonable to look to the opposite side of the road to the approaching carriageway. And so if we don't change speed, we're 10 meters short for a car that's going to be waiting there for a fraction of a second. There's no reason why our car can't slightly pull out at that time, and then all of a sudden it can get that 10 meters.
Yes.
If it was clear to the right, I suspect by the time it's thought about doing that manoeuvre, the right turns clear.
Yes. And again, this can be looked at on site, but if you're, it's a slightly different point, if you're the emerging right turner coming out of the site access, and there's a car turning right into Tugate Meadow, what this purple area shows is that there is an area of the eastbound carriageway where cars would be visible. Is that affected by the gradient or the hill at all, or would you
not
the other direction be able to see?
It is affected by the gradient further down, but it's not affected by the gradient at that point, no.
And so to what extent leaving aside your point about the near side, 85.4 meters visibility, would emergers from the site access also be able to see cars, as it were, to the left as they look of the right turner into Two-Gate Meadow?
I'm not 100% sure I follow the question, but the visibility
Yeah.
that can be seen to standard can be achieved within the carriageway, including for the gradients.
Thank you. Thank you. That will do. Thank you very much.
With manoeuvre 2, again, I'll draw attention back to what we very first started with, and was also mentioned by Mrs. Backhouse, that the PMP, which is the expected maximum movement into Two-Gate Meadow, so the AM peak is usually less, PM peak right turns in is usually the maximum, and then during the day it's less than both. So the maximum movements in the hour is recorded on 2 separate occasions as 8 on both occasions. Yes, 8. So 8 vehicles in an hour, and they're waiting there second.
Indeed.
In the worst case. That's why I think, going back to what we were talking about, what Mr. Backhouse was talking about the other day, we need to put everything in context here.
Thank you very much. And so what you heard Ms. Backhouse give her evidence yesterday, it would appear in principle, but also in relation to this scheme here, her advice, her position representing the council is that there should be no interruptions of visibility here, none, even for the transient periods that we've got in front of us. What do you say about that as an approach from a highways consultant or a safety expert?
I think that's ludicrous. I'm sorry to use that word, but you've only got to look at half the junctions in this country that have got temporary obstructions of one form or another. That's perfectly acceptable. And as we just read earlier, the MRB allows for temporary obstruction in the visibility in the right circumstances. And as I said here, this is not DMRB. This is where DMRB is used as guidance, and then you interpret it further. So you've got another layer on top of that. And more importantly, the road safety audit didn't share her view either. And they're the experts in this field. The road safety auditors, what we'll look at, they don't look at technical standards. That's one thing they actually don't look at. What they do is their perception of how the traffic will interact and behave on the road with the changing characteristics of the road due to the proposed design. That's exactly what they look at. And I hope there's no debate over that. And their interpretation is this is not a problem.
And finally, we know what the county's position is. In relation to the deceleration lane, Ms. Backhouse says, well, she doesn't think that the county looked at it at all.
The county looked at the whole design. They were very clear about the fact that they agreed to design. The statement of common ground very clearly says that they have no issues on safety or capacity with the design. And actually, the statement of common ground from the Highway Authority also said they believe the gateways would act as a speed reducing feature.
Yes.
But they don't give any interpretation on what that would be in terms of how far it would fit. And very clearly in the statement of common ground, but also in the TA, as I've already said, everyone's acknowledged that they're not relying on the speed changing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burbridge. So, subject to just coming back on that point about how many seconds.
Yes, I just need to do a measurement on that. Yeah.
by all means. So that's all. Other than that point, by way of evidence in chief. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. I know we're still a little bit early, but I think it's probably an appropriate time just to take a quick break. I suggest 15 minutes because that'll give you a little time to have a think, Mr. Burbridge, about the point I asked you about. I suggest where are we? 10:40. If we reconvene at 10:55. Okay, we're adjourned until then. Thank you. Good morning again, everybody. Time's 10:55 and the inquiry is resumed. We were touching on a point, Mr. Burbage, that you were asked about the length of time that a pedestrian standing at point B, so the Western refuge, might have their vision obscured if it was moving along either at 40 miles an hour, or I think 30 miles an hour was given as an alternative. Have you got a figure for us? That
I have indeed, sir. My maths was a factor of 10 out.
Okay.
So instead of 1.78 meters per second, it's actually 17.88 meters per second. So at 40 miles per hour, that is, it's 1.5 seconds obscured. And at 30 miles per hour, you do 13.41 meters per second. So it's actually obscured for longer, which is 2 seconds.
Sorry, I missed that one.
So at 30 miles per hour, the vehicles will be obscured for 2 seconds.
2 seconds. Thank you. I think that kind of resonates more with, how we probably think it. That sounds about reasonable.
It's funny you say that, because as I said it, I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. Car turning right is only up to 6 seconds there. So as soon as you say it, I think, I've done my maths wrong here. But thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come back and check.
Got to go. Okay, in which case I think we're then ready for cross-examination. So Mr. Defer, please, over to you.
Thank you, sir, and good morning, Mr. Burbridge.
Good morning.
Just start with a little bit of housekeeping. First things first, I won't be putting you on the spot with any mental maths, because I wouldn't want to get into a discussion on that. And secondly, just to deal with some documents that we might need, the transport assessment, which I think we've had out, core document 28, the technical note, core document 29. We'll see how we go, but possibly the bits of guidance, manual for streets, core document 30, manual for streets 2, core document 31, the DMRB document, core document 32, and possibly the HCC's guidance, core document 48. I don't know whether people want a little moment to get those out, but I think...
Yes, Mr. Defer, would you just mind?
Of course. And so if you want that list repeated, I will absolutely do so.
I had all of those open other than one, but my core document page had timed out again, so I'm just going to reopen it and get back there.
And so just to give you one final one, core document 61, which is an Atkins research document, we may need to go to it. It's referred to in the technical note, core document 29.
Okay. The technical note, Mr. Defer, what number was that again?
Core document 29, sir. That's the it follows on from the transport assessment. It is during the course of the county council and the appellant discussing highways matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, no, I'm there now. Okay, yep, far away.
Thank you. And Mr. Burbridge, are you with me on those documents?
I believe I've got all the documents, yes. Now, thank you.
When we turn to each one, obviously we can all spend a moment getting them up and etc. Just starting off on the topic of the importance of highways safety, a matter I think of common ground. Safe operation of proposed junctions are an important issue for this inquiry to consider. Yeah,
Great.
Absolutely. And if the inspector does find that the junction causes an unacceptable safety risk, you'd accept that would be an important factor to take into account in deciding whether planning permission should be granted. Appreciate not your case.
Agreed. Yeah.
Absolutely. Lovely. Moving on then to the principles of assessment, if I may, and you've looked at this point already with Mr. Warren this morning, so I think I can take it relatively briefly. Core document 29 first, please. That is the technical note.
Yes.
And figure 1 on page 2.
Yes.
is the location of the automatic traffic counts where the speed surveys were undertaken. Yeah,
it is indeed, yes.
So we can see where the westbound one is, we see where the eastbound one is, and it's explained that the one to the eastbound vehicle speed was captured using the one to the west, and the westbound vehicle speeds were captured using the one to the east. Actually, I think you can get speeds from both of them, but that's how the evidence is presented, yeah?
Yeah, yes, and if it helps you, the pictures of their location to put them in perspective is on the next page, page 3.
Yes, that's very helpful. We can see where they are as well. And we can see, for example, ATC 1, that sits within the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit as things currently stand.
Yes, indeed. In that photograph 1, you can actually just see the speed limit in the top corner.
Exactly, just make it out a little bit away. And then ATC 2, that's the other side of where the proposed access would be. So that's in the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit as things exist. And we know, don't we, that these ATC locations were near to the expected Y distances, the expected visibility distances for the proposed junction in accordance with HCC guidance. So that's how one works out where to put ATC positions.
Yes, on the approaches.
Yeah. And you've given us, helpfully, the 85th percentile wet weather speeds, which are in excess of 40 miles per hour in both directions. And we've looked at that table 2.1 of your recorded speeds in your proof of evidence.
Yes, indeed, albeit they're only just over in one's 40.
Yeah, 40.2 and 42.2 miles per hour. Yeah, absolutely. That demonstrates, as I think you've fairly recognised already, that within the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, drivers aren't complying with the existing speed limit, are they?
Currently, they're not. No, 85% of them aren't. No.
Yeah, and we don't know why that is, but it may be reasonable to presume that drivers sense or know that they're leaving Overton and getting towards a change in speed limit, they start to speed up.
I think it's reasonable to assume there's 2 factors there, in my opinion. Firstly, that you're still very much in a rural character area with hedges each side, so the driver doesn't interpret it as an urban area. And secondly, those that know the road are, as you rightly say, speeding up to leave the 30 mile an hour into the 40 because it's only just beyond there.
We don't know what the speeds, we don't have any evidence before the inquiry as to what the speeds would be further into Overton, but it's likely to presume that they'd be less, wouldn't it, than they are at this position?
It's reasonable to assume they would be less, but no, I don't actually have any recorded speed. I know Miss Backhouse mentioned speeds yesterday further down the road, but I don't have those.
Thank you. I'm just pausing because a dog is making a lot of racket. So I'm just going to take a minute, if I don't mind. I hope that's...
No, that's fine. Please do.
I'm very sorry. It was somebody just arriving at the front door. Thank you very much for your patience. What we know when we look at those, we've said the couple of reasons why that might happen. And we've looked at the Overton Hill, for example, further down towards Overton Hill, we agree that the speeds are likely to be a little bit less. And I think we're there, from what you said in your evidence this morning, that when we're assessing the safety of the proposed junction arrangements, we need to do that. We need to take into account the speeds that we've seen recorded here, don't we?
The county council, myself and others need to take that into account. auditors would also take it into account visually on site.
We'll come on to what the auditors did a little while, but just on that question, there's no dispute that that should be taken into account.
I think it's been agreed by all that the design has been taken into account on the recorded speeds, yes.
And when you mentioned in your proof of evidence, for example, 2.4, you mentioned the potential to relocate the speed limit change from its current position and provide a new gateway feature to introduce 30-mile-an-hour speed limit along the site frontage. You're not relying on that relocation, the potential relocation of the change of speed limit from its current position, are you? That's been made clear.
I'm not relying on it, nor, more importantly, are the county council when they made their decision, which they've clearly pointed out in the statement of common ground and various correspondence. So I don't think anybody's relying on it, nor indeed were the applicants or the PJA, who put the work in.
Fine.
But it is quite logical that it would be applied for, and it is quite logical that a gateway is a good place for it, but nobody's relying on it. No.
Okay, and if we look at P7, just help us with how these various. This is your appendix to the highways drawing P7.
Right. Yeah.
Just help us then with how these various bits that have been written onto it work, because the first thing that we see on that drawing is that, well, the first thing we don't see on that drawing is that the existing speed limit change isn't recorded on that drawing, is it?
No, the existing speed limit change isn't recorded on the drawing, no.
And what we have then, if one goes to the right, the first thing is existing street lighting to be extended up to the change in speed limit.
Sorry, the lighting to be...
Existing street lighting to be extended up to the change in speed limit.
Yes.
Now, just help me with this. Does that existing street lighting in your evidence get extended regardless of whether the speed limit changes? So that's just an error on the way that's been written, is it?
The gateway, I think you're right, the words could be clearer, but the gateway, the lighting and everything on this drawing is proposed as part of the works here. The key point here is it's a possibility to move the traffic regulation or to introduce a new gateway, and that's the sentence there. So although it mentions the 30-mile-an-hour sign would go at the gateway, clearly it can't if the traffic regulation order isn't approved. So it's very clear it's a possibility. Everything else is as planned in terms of the gateway feature, the right turn facilities, the islands, the lighting, etc.
Yeah, and it is unclear actually, because if you read that sentence as a whole, possibility move TRO and introduce a new gateway feature subject to separate consultation process following planning application. So the gateway feature is on the basis of that drawing is included in the possibility, but you're saying that's absolutely part of it. Just so that I understand the basis on which.
The gateway feature is part of it, and perhaps if I take you to the highway statement of common ground, for clarity on that.
Yeah.
So the highway statement of common ground, which is core document 70.
Yeah, just give me a second because I don't have it as a core document. It's just tucked away with your proofs of evidence. So I've just got to dig it out. Thank you. Yeah, I've got that in front of me now. Where do you want to take me to?
So if I could take you to page 7 and the second bullet point.
Yeah.
And there it says HCC confirmed the benefit of providing a new gateway feature in order to help reduce vehicle speeds. And then it goes on to say the application allowed for the possibility to relocate the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit change to the gateway. So the gateway. So it's clear the gateway's going in anyway. This would be subject to a traffic regulation order. So I think that helps clarify that drawing, that the gateway is intended to go in any event. And as it happens, the county council believe the gateway will have an effect on speed, irrespective of the 30-mile-an-hour moving.
Lovely. Well, I just wanted to get those points of clarity clear because it seemed to me that the drawing.
Completely understand.
Yeah, lovely. And we can approach your evidence on that basis. That's very helpful. Thank you. This change in speed limit, though, the change in speed limit itself, we're agreed that that's a separate consultation process, as you said, part of the TRO process.
Yes, it's subject to a traffic regulation order, and I'll be the first to admit it can never be guaranteed, although it is quite a logical move when you look at it on the drawing.
Yeah, the Highways Authority have said that they wouldn't be able to support the proposed amendment to the TRO and the relocation of the change in speed limit, as it wouldn't meet their criteria and the road environment is not considered to be suitable. And that the proposed change in speed limit would be unlikely to have any effect on vehicle speeds on the B3 400 through the proposed junction, given the existing road geometry. That's the position that Highways Authority have given on that point, isn't it?
So I understand that doesn't mean you wouldn't apply for a traffic regulation order at the time it's been built out. Circumstances change once you build it out, and I think there is a logic moving it from the existing location to the gateway. But as I said, that's not really a subject for this inquiry. None of us are relying on it.
No, the inspector assessment of safety shouldn't take that into account, shouldn't take the possibility of that change into account, because it can't be relied on.
Not the physical change in terms of the traffic regulation order moving the 30, but I do think the inspector, and it's down to individuals to take their own opinion, should take into account the physical features that are being put in and the reduction they could have on speed.
Yeah, we know or within the existing 30-mile-an-hour speed limit that there are 85% of drivers already exceeding the speed limit by more than 10 miles an hour, don't we? And that would be a factor to take into account in deciding how effective that might be.
That would be, but then you'd take into account, then you'd look there on site when you're on site, and you'd see islands, lighting, footways, lining, signing, and all of a sudden, I think as a driver, you'd say, this is completely different to what we were driving through previously. I'm no longer at the change in speed limit, even if it's physically still there. The character is completely different, and it will help to reinforce that 30. So I understand your point, but I don't agree with it. I think the character will completely change, and you need to put it in the context with what it's going to go to, not what's there now.
This is your point about the urbanising of the road, isn't it? You made that point quite a few times in your examination in chief. That's the sort of your headline point, is you feel that these works will urbanise this section of road.
Yes, and the full extreme of that is when you have houses on the front of driveways. That's full urbanisation. But any introduction of islands, lighting, signing, lining, this will help to urbanise it, and the gateway especially will help the driver to understand they're approaching the village. So in my opinion, and obviously I can't prove it, but in my opinion, it will change the character of that road. And well, it definitely will change the character of the road, and it will reduce the speed of vehicles. That's an opinion shared by the county council as well, as we just referred to.
It feels at the moment, and the inspector will form his own judgment, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it feels, I think you said in your evidence, Chief, relatively rural at the moment in that location, hedgerows on either side.
It does, yes, but it's not just the hedgerows, it's the lack of street furniture, the lack of lining, the lack of signing, lack of lighting. It's everything about it. It's not just hedgerows. Hedgerows have one effect, but it's everything else. The introduction of new junctions, for instance.
We've got existing junctions in the location. We've got Tugate Meadow, we've got the sports ground. No doubt we'll have to talk about those a little bit. With what we don't have in that area is any frontage development.
Oh.
And we're not going to have frontage development with this appeal scheme.
No, you're not. And as I said a few minutes ago, it's not complete urbanisation like private driveways and housing. So I'm not suggesting it goes to that extreme. And I've not even speculated in this inquiry. I don't believe at what the speed reduction would be. All I've said is I'm confident there will be a speed reduction. And I am confident on that. And so are the county council.
Sure.
I'm not suggesting for 1 minute it drops to 30. I don't know is the answer.
Sure. And if we're trying to be precautionary about this, one thing to take into account, there is likely to be some urbanisation.
Yes.
You say it's not complete urbanisation, and the inspector will need to form a view on how effective those features will be. Yeah. Yes. And take into account the absence of certain urbanising features which might have a greater effect.
Yes, and I'd go as far to say if you put the 30 mile an hour, if there's no reason to assume it wouldn't do the traffic regulation, or in my view, go through. But if it does, I'll be the first to admit there's no guarantee it'll still reduce the speed to 30 mile an hour, because, as you said, there's no frontage development, there's no driveways and the rest. So the speed, even if the speed moves, is likely to be, not likely, could be in excess of 30 still. So I would accept that. That's why it was important to take those points into consideration in the design.
Yeah, and I would suggest that the things like frontage development, expect to reform his own view, but things like the frontage development are really the key features. One might do a bit of signing and lining, but the key features are drivers' perception when they're travelling along there, and they're still going to have a perception of a relatively rural entrance to this village.
If you were to put houses both side and driveways, it would have a greater effect. I can say that, but I can categorically say, in my view, the urbanisation that is occurring for this design, with the gateway as well, the lighting, the signing, the lining, and everything that's not there now, to be quite honest, together with a new junction as well, making drivers aware of a new junction, will slow traffic. I don't know to what degree. But if it was in shopping centre and shopping area, it would be slower still. Yes.
Okay, I think we've taken that point as far as we can, and the inspector ultimately will form his own view. Just then sticking, I think, with your just a bit of orientation still, if I may. Volume 2 of your proof of evidence has those helpful drawings. Can we just go to the first one of those? I think it's probably best.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just want to understand what we're going to have in place. So we've got the existing 2-gate Meadow Junction starting in the west and moving to the east.
Yes.
Yeah. We then get the pedestrian crossing, I think, comes in immediately after, to the west of that.
Yes.
You probably need to flick between 1 and 2.
Yes, I was putting my glasses up to see. Thank you. Yeah.
And then immediately to the east of that, sorry, I think I said west last time, I meant east, we'll still have the existing change of speed limit within that deceleration lane, won't we?
Yes, and I would hope this helps clarify one of your other points of view, because as you can see on my drawing here, I've put the existing there, and when we get to the gateway, I've put gateway, making it clear there is a gateway and any potential speed limit change.
This isn't the reason I asked you about P7 is P7, I think, is the one you're asking the inspector to approve. And the other one, this is just a sort of orientation drawing, isn't it?
Yes, but P7 is obviously the same drawing in terms of the physical features and would be subject to a detailed design in section 278, where all those designs get worked forward further.
Yeah, I only asked you about that to clarify. You're very helpful with your clarification. Okay. And I'm very happy for you to point it out that you've put it on this drawing as well. So once we have, then in the deceleration lane, we've got the existing change 30 to 40.
Yes.
And then we've got the new junction. Yes. And then we've got the proposed eastern crossing. And yes. There is quite a lot going on there, isn't there? In terms of things that a driver would have to be aware of. 2 junctions in closer proximity than DMRB would say is ideal. I appreciate you say there can be a reduction in that. A speed limit in the middle and a pedestrian crossing in the middle. That is quite a complicated arrangement.
I beg to differ. You say there's quite a lot going on. It's not uncommon to have 2 right turn lanes. I don't call that in my job, that is not a complicated junction by any means. That's a pretty straightforward standard junction. But it's interesting you say that, because if you presuming it as a complicated junction, then logically the driver would slow down further if they find it a complicated junction, and they would get a speed reduction. As I'm saying, in features you reduce speed. But no, that's not a complicated junction from a highway engineer's point of view. I've got to be honest, from a private view, I don't think it is either.
Well, that's an interesting point. It's a point that Mr. Warren put yesterday to Ms. Backhouse, basically saying complication is a good thing. Is that your point, that complication is good because somehow it will make drivers take more care? Is that what you're?
I think you need to be careful between if we're talking in the complication in the context of, as I understood it, a number of features in the context of the question, then that is good because it adds to the road environment.
Oh, I'm afraid you've just frozen on my screen.
Vehicle speed. If we're on about complicated, as
just go back. Just go back
Oh,
about just the start of your answer to that, will you? You just froze on us. You probably didn't realise.
If I understood the context of the question from Mr. Warren in terms of the complicated, if we're on about the number of features and the context in the road, then I think that is a good thing because it allows the driver to perceive more things and will urbanise more and reduce speed. If we're on about complicated as in confusing, by that, as in, and I don't think that was, if you put it in the context of the question, I don't think that's what was meant. We mean confusing, don't know what they're doing. That's different because that isn't a good thing if it's confusing, because the driver, that's when you can have instance arrest. I don't consider this junction complicated. I consider there are a number of things and elements to it that form the whole junction design, but it's not complicated from a driver point of view. If I misunderstood the context of the question, then I apologise from Mr. Warren, but that's as I understood.
No, I think you've explained the point very well, if I may say so. And I think what is clear is that there is a line to be drawn, if I put it this way, between complexity and confusion. And whilst there may be introducing features which will help to urbanise matters, there is a risk of causing confusion if there are too many things going on in an illogical order. Is that fair?
That's fair if you believe this to be an illogical order, but I consider this a standard layout of 2 right turn lanes with islands. So I wouldn't agree with that statement in the context of this inquiry, but I understand your point, but I do not accept that point in terms of this drawing, no.
Would you accept that having the change in speed limit sandwiched in between these 2 junctions is far from ideal?
I would accept the change in speed limit as Ms. Backhouse said is, I think she said she'd expect to move, were her words. I would consider it unusual to be in that location, which is why I think logically they would move it to the gateway. There is no reason why it can't stay. It has no implications on safety, whether it stays or not, but it's illogical to leave it, in my view, and not move it to the gateway when you've got a purpose-built feature which delineates the start of the urban area. That's why I believe there's a good chance it'll go ahead. However, absolutely no reason why it couldn't stay. But
well, doesn't it introduce exactly that confusion element that I was just talking about? Doesn't it introduce exactly that by leaving it there?
No, it's a speed limit. Drivers aren't going to get confused about speed limit. We've already discussed they don't tend to drive to speed limits in all instances. They tend to drive to the surroundings of the road around them and the environment they're within. I don't know. I wouldn't accept that using the driver at all.
Okay. I just want to, in that case, go to the transport assessment, please, and see how this was dealt with in that, if I may. I'm afraid for this exercise, we do have to go a little bit through the history of it, so forgive me for that. Do you have core document 28, please?
I do indeed, yes.
Thank you. And the first document I want to start with is on page 44, I think, of the PDF.
Sorry, I've got paper copy.
Sorry, in the paper copy, it's a bit tricky. It's about 1/10 of the way through it. And it's called the technical note, and it's dated the 23rd of October 2019.
Yes, I have that, yes.
Thank you. And you'll see there that the author of that document is Graham Smith. Just keep that in your mind.
Yeah.
And sir, do you have that document?
I'm just getting to it now. Let me pick it out from the core documents again. Sorry, which core document?
It's within the transport assessment. It's core document 28.
28, yeah.
But I'm afraid it's one of the sort of appendices to that transport assessment, which is probably easiest navigable on the PDF because there aren't sequential page numbers.
Okay.
Okay. And it's PDF page 44.
44. It's a large on this one. It's just loading.
Yeah, I've had some difficulty with it as well. I think it's because it's got tables and things at the end of it. They always slow it down.
I'm with you.
Thank you. And just so that I've introduced this so that we know what it is, it's a document that was at an early stage, 23rd of October 2019, authors Jeremy Smith, and it's a transport scoping note is the subject. Got all that, Mr. Burbridge?
Sorry, the author's Graham Smith.
Graham Smith, sorry, I've probably given the wrong name just then, didn't I? And then one goes through it, by all means take your time, but site access section 5.
Section 5 for site access, yes, okay.
And 5.13.
Yes.
Directly where the site access will be on the B3400 London Road, there's a change of speed limit. This change of speed limit indicates a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit to the west towards Overton, a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit to the east towards Basingstoke. As the site access is located where this change of speed limit takes place, it's proposed that this TRO is relocated further to the east of its current position. Therefore, proposed that the change of speed limit is located approximately 130 metres east of its current position, bringing Bury Sports down. Within the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, this relocation of speed limit will benefit the community and users of Bury Down Sports Ground and associated nursery on site. So at this stage, appreciate it's an early stage, the clear indication is that 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is going to be moved.
I'll go as far to say that statement still bears true now. The intention now is still to ask for a traffic regulation order now after the works to move the speed limit. I still feel it's beneficial and would be the icing on the cake, if you like. I think it's nice to have in my evidence. So yeah, that statement is still true.
And then 5.14 deals with traffic calming features. 5.15 then, the visibility displays shown on the proposed design, which we'll have a look at in a moment, were designed to ensure that the desirable site minimum stopping distance is achievable for 30-mile-an-hour speed limit in line with DMRB. This forms a robust basis for the emerging site design access, does not consider the reduced SSD set out with the manuals for streets. So at this stage, the designer's looking at a 30-mile-an-hour, the change is 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, yeah?
But they were looking to relocate the traffic regulation order, which we're still looking to do, and they were then looking to design the speed of the visibility displays in accordance with the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Of course, we know the county weren't prepared to accept that and wanted the whole design to be appropriate to the 40-mile-an-hour recorded ATC speeds when it was submitted as part of the application.
Yeah, we'll come to what the county said and when they said it. But at this stage, 30 miles an hour is what the designer is working to, yes?
And this is a year in advance of the transport assessment being done. Well, I should point that out, but yes, yeah. That's correct.
We've looked at the date. I just want to go in chronological order, by all means caveat it. That's absolutely fine. And then we can go to Appendix C of that note, which is PDF page 61.
Appendix C, yes.
Yeah, and this is an earlier version of the drawing that's now relied on. Obviously, this is P1, we're now at P7.
Yes.
And at that stage, it's not a proposed or subject to further consultation. It's relocate, change of speed limit, and new gateway features of 30 miles an hour.
That's correct. They were working on the assumption it would happen, and rather than being subject to regulation order, which brings in ambiguity. And you're right, the speed limit is shown as definitively changing there, as indeed of the visibility displays in accordance with the 30.
Yeah. And then The next document I want to go to is the road safety audit, please. That's PDF page 147.
147.
Which, yeah, and again, forgive me, it's now about, well, it's just over, it's probably a third of the way through. There's a test for my mental maths, which is showing it's not very good.
I've got a separate copy of the road safety audit, so that might be easier for me. Let's see how we go, if that's all right.
I'm sure that would do just fine. So do you have the road safety audit?
I do, I'm still on the transport assessment.
It's the same document, sir. Sorry, it's within that. I should have said it's all within the transport assessment, and it's PDF page 147 of that big bundle of core document 28. So,
can I ask what page? Sorry to trouble you. Could I ask what page of the road safety audit it is?
Let's start with the front cover.
Okay. I think I can manage that.
Great. I just want to we looked at the date of the scoping note. That was the 23rd of October 2019. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And this audit, 5th of December 2019. Okay, see that from the front cover?
Yes.
And then if one goes through to Appendix A, which is page 160 of the PDF.
Appendix A.
Yeah. We see that the documents that have been examined include the transport scoping note, which we can presume, I think, is the one that we've just looked at.
My Appendix A is different, but okay.
Well, let's make sure you're looking at the right. We're looking at the right thing together. I don't want to put things unfairly to you. Appendix A, it says documents examined.
Bear with me a second, please.
Don't worry, of course, take your time. It follows on from page 12 of the audit in my version, which is the core document version.
Might be easier if I go to the online version then.
Well, okay.
Sorry, could you remind me the CD number again?
Yeah, it's core document 28.
Yep.
28. And once you're within that document, once you've got it open, we looked at page, we were going to go to page 160 of the PDF, which is Appendix A of the road safety audit.
Yes, got it.
Right.
Sorry for that.
No. It's the feature of us all working electronically and trying to do our best in these times. Absolutely understand. The documents examined are the transport scoping note. One can presume, I think, that's the scoping note that we've just looked at, the 23rd of October one.
I'm not 100% sure without checking, but I'm happy to assume that.
The proposed site access arrangement, which is given a number, but I think if one goes to Appendix B, so page 162, we can see the site access arrangement. Page 162, Appendix B, see the site access arrangement they were looking at, because that's where they've put their numbers onto.
Yes.
And that looks very similar to the plan that I just took you to in the back of the scoping note, yeah?
It does indeed, yes.
With the you said yourself, with the change of speed limit definitively shown.
Yes.
And then if we go back within the document to see what the road safety auditors said, 1.3 tells us that the audit comprised an examination of the documents listed in Appendix A, which is what I've just taken you to.
Sorry, beg your pardon, 1.3.
which is page 148 of the PDF.
1.3. Yes, got it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And the road safety audit was undertaken in accordance with the brief provided by Graham Smith. We've looked at Mr. Smith was the author of that scoping note, okay? And then there was a site visit, etc.
Yes.
Yeah. And then 1.8, we see a description of the scheme.
Yes.
Scheme consists of a proposed access for a 90-unit residential development in Overton off the B3400. The site access consists of a new right-turn ghost island to the east of Two-Gate Lane and includes new pedestrian refuge islands and the extension of the existing 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Also, improvements are being proposed to Two-Gate Lane, including a crossing point and a ghost island. So, within the description of the scheme, 30 miles an hour extension is clearly stated, isn't it?
At the time of the audit, yes.
Yeah. And there's no indication in this document. By all means, read on the next, just so that we've done it. The existing layout, there's a street lighting on Two-Gate Lane, and further east of the site is the B3400. The speed limit at the access site is currently 40 miles an hour. But there's no indication in this document that the road safety auditors assessed the safety of the junction on anything other than thinking that the proposed change in speed limit would take place.
No, I disagree. There's no evidence in the document, but you're actually saying an auditor would blindly assume. Well, I don't know what you're saying actually, but if you're suggesting an auditor would take the 30 mile an hour as given when they know it's subject to the traffic regulation order, then I don't agree, because the road safety auditor, and I think I've touched on this, I've definitely put it in my proof, and I think I touched on it previously, and also when we started talking in cross-examination, and it's down to what's there on site. So it's the interpretation of what would happen. And as I said myself, just because you put a 30 in, it doesn't mean it goes to 30 miles an hour. And an auditor's perfectly aware of that. They don't do technical assessment on technical design guidance. They look at the road safety side of things. So when they're on site, they will look at the scheme, they will look at the intention of the scheme, and they will look at the perception of their reality of the scheme, and they will draw their opinion based on that opinion, irrespective of the 30 working, not working, moving, not moving. So I'll quite happily say the intention was to move the 30 at the time of the audit, and the auditor would have had that in mind, but the auditor would have dismissed that if they didn't feel it had any effect. If they felt it would have an effect, then they will take it into account. But as I previously said, it's the road features that have more effect than the limit itself. So I think the auditor would have taken that into account, and that, to be quite honest, that's exactly what I was trained in to start with. So that's, that is what you take into account. You don't take into account blindly what you give.
Well, they're asked to assess the scheme, aren't they? And the scheme at that stage included categorically the movement of the 30 mile an hour speed limit.
Yes, but they're asked to assess the scheme based on their perception of how it will perform in reality on site. That's the road safety auditor's job. Is it safe on site? What's the perception of it will change? Now, they will have assumed, I will accept the 30 change, but they will not have categorically assumed just because you put a 30 in, it drops to 30. They would have taken their perception of how drivers would behave within that junction as part of that scheme. And I don't believe for a minute they're assuming everyone will drop down to 30 just because 30 will change, because an auditor's not that naive. These are experienced people.
That's just speculation, isn't it?
No. Well, you say it's speculation. That's what I was trained in. I work in audits all the time. In terms of, I'm not an auditor myself now, but I work with auditors all the time. So this is what I do for a living, day in, day out. So it's not speculation. I know categorically what they do. What is speculation? Oh, sorry.
No, forgive me. I really don't want to interrupt you because it doesn't help anybody, and I apologise. It's just a question of the Zoom occasionally, whether you finished or not. But you carry on and then I'll ask my question.
No, I was going to say what I can't speculate is what degree they would have taken it into account.
No, we can't. What we do know, though, is that the road safety audit, the stage 1 road safety audit, was not undertaken on the basis that there would be no change in the speed limit location.
The scheme in front of them intended to move the speed limit, yes, and that's what was in front of them for the audit. But the auditor is not naive. They know, one, it's subject to a traffic regulation order and may not happen, and two, they know also just because you move the speed limit, it doesn't mean you change the speed of vehicles dramatically. There are other features that affect that, and they will take that into consideration when they make their judgment.
Well, I've put the point to you in respect to conformers' own view on that. I want to move on then to how this developed. And can we go to the, I've helpfully not given myself the number, page number, but it's the pre-application email response from Graham Smith. Let me just get the page number. I think it's 138 from memory, but that will be a test. Yeah, 138.
138 of the
same document, core document 28. Okay, I just want to see how things developed, if I may. So this comes after the road safety audit.
Yes.
And it's the 6th of January 2020.
Yes.
Author Graham Smith again. And there's obviously been some correspondence between Highways HCC and the applicants' transport advisors are responding to what HCC are telling them. Yeah?
Yes. Sorry, 2 seconds.
Yeah, take your time. So do you have that page 138 before I move on?
I do, yeah. Yes.
I don't know if you said it comes after the road safety audit. I think you're right, but I think the date's wrong because it says 6th of January 2020 and the road safety audit, I think it just said it was July 2020.
No, road safety audit was December 2019.
Sorry, beg your pardon. No, I'm looking at the front cover. Sorry. Yeah.
December 2019, my wife's birthday. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, but it definitely comes after it anyway. I can see from
comment 1 from HCC. Your suggestion to introduce a change in the speed limit is noted. I'm of the view that we should seek an access solution within the existing speed limit, and if subsequently a change would be appropriate, Highways Authority or client be confident they've got an implementable scheme. That being said, about the outcome of a future public consultation exercise. So HCC, I think, you tell me if they said anything earlier than this, but for the first time are really telling the applicants this change in speed limit isn't guaranteed.
Exactly. They're making it very clear that any scheme submitted needs to be in accordance with the current speeds.
Yeah, and that comes after the road safety audit.
It does.
And what the designer says in response is that for the proposed access to be contained within the existing speed limit, the access would need to be moved westwards closer to the existing access at Two-Gate Lane, which would not be possible without the right turn lane crossing both the site access and access into Two-Gate Meadow, or eastwards closer to the existing access into Berry Down Playing Field on the opposite side of the road, required additional land outside of the control of the client. So he's been quite clear in response to this suggestion that the speed limit doesn't change, that one would need to move the access.
That's right. They pushed back and suggested that the access, the speed limit shouldn't change. Yes. And
carry on. Consideration was given to the possibility of creating a single access point at Two-Gate Meadow. However, due to third-party land constraints, it's not possible to do so. Furthermore, the creation of a new access point was preferable due to vertical alignment of the B3400 restricting visibility. The position of the access also responds to ecological constraints in that it's allow for large proportions of existing established vegetation to be retained. Therefore, the site access has been positioned in the optimum location within the land controlled by the client and avoids any third-party land. However, this does mean the site access falls directly on top of the change of speed limit location, which ultimately means that the relocation of the change of speed limit is necessary.
Yeah, I can read what they say. I don't agree with them. It's not necessary, it's desirable. And I think it's logical. but it's not necessary. You can have the speed limit at any point along the road.
But the designer is, the response from the designer is that change in speed limit is necessary.
That's their view. It's not my view. My view is it can stay where it is, and clearly that's a view shared by the county council at the moment, because they've approved the scheme as is within the statement of common ground. So their view is it can stay where it is. That was their view at the time. Whether they were saying that to try to get it to move, I don't know, but that's their view. It's not my view.
And just lest it be said that it had anything to do with being able to achieve visibility splays, read the next paragraph. Notwithstanding the issue of the access being directly on the signage, the visibility display requested 102 meters can be achieved as shown on the drawing. So the concern of the designer isn't to do with visibility displays, it's to do with this issue of complication and confusion, isn't it?
No, it's their opinion. If they put, but ultimately it's relocation, the speed limit is necessary. I don't know why they said that. I'm not them. Firstly, it is not physically necessary, but it is logical. Whether they actually mean necessary to mean logical, I don't know. I can't speak for them, because it is logical to relocate the speed limit. It isn't logical to have it anywhere other than the gateway feature. However, technically, not necessary. And as I'll repeat again, that's what the county council have accepted as well.
Carry on then. Number 3, please. The highways point this. The highways response, as my engineer believes, a 102 meter SSD is more appropriate than 90 SSD you show. And then the technical response from PJA, 102 meters would be achievable within the public highway with some additional vegetation clearing. But however, the stopping sight distances you suggested are based on criteria from DMRB for the existing 85th percentile speed limit and do not account for the future design speed that will come into effect as part of the relocation of the speed limit. The future access will require the change of speed limit to be relocated further to the east of the site, and therefore the future design speed of 30 miles an hour will apply, which will equate to a stopping sight distance of 90 meters based on criteria from DMRB. So it's not just once he said it's necessary, he thought it's important to reiterate the point that change of speed limit will be required.
In their view, they are pushing for the speed limit to be required, be changed. I get that, but I would also draw your attention to the fact that that's P0 drawing. There's 7 iterations of that drawing since then, where people have gone backwards and forwards, and the highway highway authority have asked for several searching questions, and further technical notes have been produced in order to get the scheme to a level that is acceptable. So this is P0. We're on P7 version, and at the time, PJA were pushing for the speed limit. I accept that. I'm not denying that, but it's not necessary in accordance with the design in front of us at the moment, P7, as accepted by the Highway Authority.
But that issue that's identified by the designer at an early stage of this process has never been resolved, has it? It remains outstanding.
Which issue?
The fact that the speed limit is in between the 2 junctions, is on top of the new site access. That hasn't been resolved.
It's been resolved in terms of the county council accepting that they accept if it can't move, it can stay where it is. A view I firmly share.
Yeah, not the view clearly at this stage, at least, of PJA who were designing the junction.
Not their view at that time, or if they were trying to convince the Highway Authority and putting it stronger than perhaps they honestly believe. I can't speak for them. It's my clear view, giving evidence now that it doesn't need to change. It's the Highway Authority's clear view. It doesn't need to change.
So is your evidence that PJA were at some stages trying to mislead the Highways Authority?
No, I'm not suggesting they were trying to mislead the Highway Authority. I'm saying they were pushing strongly for this change in speed limit, which is very logical, and it is logical to change the speed limit. Whether they were too enthusiastic in their words or not, I can't speak for them. But at that time, they felt it would be beneficial, and it still is beneficial, and should be moved. I accept that. It says that. I accept the audit was done with the intention it would be moved.
So, thank you. That's helpful that you accept that the audit was done with the intention that it would be moved.
But with my previous caveats, the auditor, as I said, isn't blind and naive. They take into account all the considerations.
Well, okay, fine. We've been over that. Now, just to move things on then and deal with the part of the transport assessment that you've sort of referred the inspector to in your proof of evidence. Let's go to page 26 of the PDF, which, if you've got the transport assessment as a hard copy, I think is internal page 24.
I'll stay with your PDF now. I've got it, if that's all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take your time. And this is the passage that you refer to, or you refer to one of the paragraphs of in your 4.6 of your proof of evidence. Yeah, this is the passage from the transport assessment. So later, discussions have carried on, as you say. Yeah.
That's right. Yes, discussions have evolved. Yes.
And 5.27 to start with. The proposed relocation of the speed limit would result in the site access being subject to a design speed of 30 miles an hour. Introduction of the new junction and relocation of the change of speed limit will change the character of the B3400 in this location, but will keep it with the residential feel. Thus, design principles from MS2 will be considered more suitable in this location. We'll look at that in a minute. But what the transport assessment is still talking about there is a 30 mile an hour design speed, isn't it?
What they're saying there, and I agree with them, in this area, manual for streets is more appropriate than DMRB. However, they have reiterated that point, and a point I completely agree with. I don't think it's necessary to be using DMRB, which is for trunk roads. This is in keeping with whether you say it's a light traffic rural road or an urban area. It's perfectly in keeping with manual streets. However, they've made that point again, but as we later come on to, they backed down in terms of the design with the highway authority and designed it to accord with the ATCs and the guidance within DMRB.
This is 5.28, I think, is what you're referring to now. For a 30 mile an hour road, Manifest Streets requires a visibility display of 2.4 times 43 to be achieved at the site access. However, for the purpose of this TA, visibility displays have been shown for the current recorded speed limit using principles from DMRB, as this is considered to be a robust approach and demonstrates that the site access could be implemented without the relocation of the change of speed limit. Yeah, and that's what you rely on to say that everything is okay now.
Yes, and I'll draw your attention to the last sentence there, where they've now clearly said can be implemented without the relocation of the change in speed limit. So they themselves have now said that, and we're talking the same people.
Yeah, and what the inspector can record, can't he, is that is at the very least a very clear change of position to that set out by the same transport consultant company previously.
Yes, they felt manual for streets was appropriate. They felt that should be the design criteria. I agree with them. That would have been my starting approach as well. Highway Authority did not accept that. They wanted to be robust and design it to the guidance of the DMRB where applicable and use the recorded speed. And that was what was done. I completely agree with the approach they've taken on that. And I completely agree with them that I think manual streets is the more appropriate.
What was my question? What was my question? Sorry, I think you may have strayed off topic. Maybe I didn't make it clearly enough. I'll ask you again if you didn't understand it.
Sorry, please ask me just in case I did.
The statement that it could be implemented without the relocation of the change of speed limit, that is a very clear change of position to that which they previously set out.
Yes.
And what is discussed there is not anything to do with the speed limit issues with the speed limit being in the junction. All that is discussed there is the achievement of site stopping distances.
No, in actual fact, it's visibility displays.
Forgive me, yeah. Forgive me, you're absolutely right. Achievement of visibility displays there. But we know, don't we, that previously their concerns, so we looked at it, the section saying notwithstanding, previously visibility displays being achieved weren't what their concern was about that location.
I'm sorry, I'd have to go back again. So
Fine.
we go.
Okay, I'll put it to you. I'll be corrected, and you can, Mr. Warren, if he wants to, can correct me in re-examination if I've got that wrong. We've gone through the documents. I don't think we need to go back there unless you really want to.
Okay, right.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to go through that transport assessment because that's not something that I got from your evidence. I didn't get that there'd been a clear change in position by the transport assessment. Is that something you were aware of previously?
I was aware of it previously, but we're dealing with the scheme in front of us as part of the inquiry, and I'm dealing predominantly, the scheme starts when the application's put in for the Highway Authority to determine. There is work in advance of that in terms of scoping and the rest, which has been discussed with the Highway Authority, and the position of how the application should be put forward has been clearly discussed. Clearly, the previous PJA don't agree they feel it should be manual for streets. I agree with them, but nevertheless, they have done exactly what the Highway Authority have asked for, and they have done it in accordance with BMRB. That's what they made very clear. So their position has changed in terms of trying to get this over the line, in terms of trying to get a breach agreement by being overly robust.
For example, did you not think it was important to report that change when you were asserting that the road safety audit would have been assessed on a different basis? Didn't you think it was important to make clear that at the time of the road safety audit, the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit was definitive, as you put it in your words earlier?
Well, as I said to you, as I answered previously, the auditor will take into account the character of the road and the scheme advancing. I apologise if I in any way misled by not actually saying at the time it was 30. I also didn't say it was the version P0 of the scheme, and we're now on P7. Things move on. But the auditor will take into account the character and what they believe will be the real life situation of the road. Okay. I don't think that's influenced by the 30, significantly by the 30 moving or not moving. It's
okay.
more about the physical features and changing an urban area.
Site stopping distances then, please. And a site stopping distance, just so that we know what we're talking about, and you'll correct me if I've got this wrong, is the distance within which drivers need to be able to see ahead to stop from a given speed. Is that fair?
So the site stopping distance is, as you say, in terms of what we designed to. The actual distances, in terms of the braking distances, are far less than that. So that's what we designed to in terms of the site stopping distance, not the distance actually physically stop to, which we all know is contained within one of the core documents that Ms. Backhouse put in terms of the actual real site stopping distance.
But we design to site stopping distances for a reason, don't we? You're not asking.
You design to site stopping distances, and if you deviate from those, you have to look at the reasons for deviating from those in terms of reality of it being. So yes.
And there's no just. I think this is all pretty uncontroversial stuff for a little while. HCC want the desirable minimum site stopping distances. That's recorded in the statement of common ground. I think it's between you and them at page 6, final bullet.
Yep.
Yeah. And we see slightly different calculations. I spent a little while trying to work out which calculation was which, but I think it's just various iterations. I don't think we need to get bogged down in them. The ones given in core document 29, the technical note, those are the ones that I think you gave to the inquiry, the 94 meters eastbound and the 120 meters westbound.
Yeah, so it's 94 eastbound and westbound.
Have I got that wrong? Sorry.
94 westbound and 121 eastbound. but
Yeah.
it would be west. When I say eastbound, pulling out, obviously the drivers are approaching from the west, so there's westbound traffic. Probably, if I may, if we just go to my drawing, or not my drawing, the PJA drawing at volume 2 of my proof of evidence.
That you're cross-examining yourself. That's where I was going to go next. Carry on.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. I was just trying to clarify.
That's absolutely fine. Those are what's shown on your drawer, on that drawer, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm awfully sorry to interrupt, but can I just wind things back?
Yeah.
The stopping distances that you just quoted, Mr. Burbidge, can you give those to me again?
Yes, they're on the drawing P7, which is 94. So as you're pulling out of the access, it's 94 meters to the left, if you like, into the village,
Yeah.
and it's 120 meters, 1 meters looking to the right out of the village. I'll put it that way, but they are shown clearly on P7. Oh, right, I was trying to help by explaining.
I'm desperately trying to find the note I made of Miss Backhouse because she did the same, and I wasn't. Are those the same?
They should be the same, although I noticed Miss Backhouse did quote the wrong speed at one occasion from one direction.
So I think so. So I don't think there needs to be anything between us on this point.
Okay. All right.
The ones that are used on that plan, I think there was a reference in the, if one traces it back in the transport assessment, initially different site stopping distances were used. But I think where the appellant's got to with HCC is that the ones in the technical note, as shown on the drawing, the ones to be used. I don't think there's any dispute between us on that. And
Yeah. No, that's not.
I'd agree with that because that's the approved drawing, which would go on to detailed plan. So that's what, if the inspector is minded to approve this application, that's what will be built out with those.
And they've been calculated using HCC's calculator to do these things, which is how HCC wants it to be calculated. Yeah. Yes. And so there was some discussion, I think, in your proof of evidence, and correct me if I've misunderstood. You've raised the issue as to whether the visibility displays should have been calculated using manual for streets or DMRB. Is that fair?
I still maintain that manual for streets is more appropriate, but it's been done to DMRB. And as we just discussed previously, PJA felt manual for streets was more appropriate.
Okay. Can I just look?
We are where we are. It's been done to DMRB.
Can I just look at that issue with you then? I was hoping not to, but manual for streets. Then I'm afraid core document 30. To start with, please.
Yep.
And page 90 of that document, which I think will be a PDF number, but once I get there, I'll tell you. Yeah, it is a PDF number. And it's also the internal page numbers. Okay, page 90. Mm-hmm. And this is stopping sight distances, manual for streets. This section provides guidance on stopping sight distances for streets where the 85th percentile speeds are up to 60 kilometers per hour. At speeds above this, the recommended SSDs in the design manual for road and bridges may be more appropriate. Do you see that?
I do.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fuller, I'm behind you. I've got manual for streets 2, PDF 90.
So manual for streets 1, sir, is what I'm in, but we could make the same point. We could make the same point in manual for streets 2 if that's easier. Manual for streets 1, which is core document 30. So the perhaps just for your note,
yeah,
is paragraph 7.5.1. And the point made there, read it out. And of course, Mr. Burbidge, if you think any other bit needs to be read out, then by all means do. But this section provides guidance on stopping sight distances for streets where the 85th percentile speeds are up to 60 kilometers per hour. At speeds above this, the recommended SSDs in the DMRB may be more appropriate. Yeah?
I see that, yes.
So just looking at manual for streets, we know here that we've got 85th percentile speeds. We've got to do a little bit of maths, but above 60 kilometers an hour, don't we?
So 60 is 37.
Yeah.
Bit.
And so what it's telling you is above that, one should be looking, or might want to look, they may be more appropriate to look at DMRB.
So it says two things here. Firstly, I was at the launch of Manual for Streets, and that was put in for simplicity because it refers to the table overleaf, which does 37 miles per hour. All the research was done up to 40 miles per hour, and Manual for Streets 2, I think, clarifies that Manual for Streets applies to 40 mile an hour roads. And I believe strongly that despite the ATC recorded speed being above 40, 40.2 and 42, I think the other one, that once this design goes in, it will be below 40. So I still feel Manual for Streets should be used. However, it hasn't been used. It has been DMRB. And my position hasn't changed. I still feel that to be the case. And I can take you references, if you like, in Manual for Streets 2 that clearly say it's on now.
Well, look, I'll let you be re-examined by Mr. Warren on that point if you want to go to those documents. I put to you that it's directing the reader to look at DMRB above 60 kilometers per hour, and you don't agree with that. That's where we are.
It is in that Manual for Streets 2 explains things further and makes it clear it's 40 miles an hour. And I believe the changes on this road will bring the speed down below 40 miles an hour. Therefore, I still believe Manual for Streets 2 is the appropriate one. But I'm quite happy to say we've designed DMR, well, not we, they've taken the DMRB guidance as the starting position, not Manual for Streets.
Yeah, I was hoping that using the DMRB guidance was going to be uncontroversial. It's just this point that you say that Manual for Street standards are significantly less onerous, which is the evidence you give at 4.16 of your proof of evidence. Yeah,
it is, yes.
But that's only right if we're looking at speeds up to 60 kilometers per hour, isn't it? Because we're not given stopping site distances above that in Manual for Streets, are we?
So Manual for Streets 2 explains it further, but what I would say is,
well, just on Manual for Streets, I promise you we'll go to Manual for Streets 2.
No, it's all right. So what I would say with Manual for Streets 1 is, even if we take that phrase you just took, which is 30, let's work it out exactly, 60.
I've tempted you into some maths. 37.5.
I believe that is miles per hour. That's not unreasonable to assume these works as proposed won't reduce the speed to 37.5 miles per hour. So if we just take that statement as you've referred me to, I don't believe for a minute we won't get speeds down to 37.5 miles per hour. As I said in my evidence in chief, I'm not sure we'll get down to 30, even if we move the speed limit. So I still feel Manual for Streets is the appropriate one here, but that's not what the drawing has been done. It's done to using the guidance of DMRB.
Fine. Manual for Streets 2 then, please.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is core document 31.
Yep.
And obviously take me anywhere you want within it, but I was going to take you to page 74.
Okay. Yep.
And this point about below and above 60 kilometers per hour, we see that again, don't we, in Manual for Streets 2, in table 10.1.
Table 10.1.
Which is the bottom of page 7, well, bottom of page 74.
Oh, right, sorry, yes, yeah. Design speed 70 kilometers per hour and below, yeah. That's what that table says.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's consistent with Manual for Streets 1. It's directing the reader to look at DMRB above 60 kilometers per hour, isn't it?
I'd have to read it, but it probably does. Summary recommendations. I can't see reference to DMRB there, but that is the case anyway, yes.
Okay, and sorry, the reference, I think, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but is an old version of DMRB comments as TD 993. I think for people who've been in highways longer than I have might recall that was part of DMRB, which I think has been superseded.
Right. Yes.
I think I can make that point good in a moment if I need. If that
No, that's I would agree that is the same. That was the old reference. Yeah.
Yeah. If you wanted to check it, you can go to core document 58. And
I'm quite happy.
It's formally that. Okay, fine. And so, then look at the HCC guidance, please, on this point. Core document 48.
Sorry, I've got it all out now. Yes, core document 48. Yeah.
Fine. And this is HCC guidance, site stopping distance visibility displays. You can see 1.3 policy and approach, page 3 of that.
Yes.
DMRB visibility standards apply where the design speed is above 60 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, so HCC, again, directing one to DMRB. Then if one goes to 3.13,
yes,
3.1.3 of this, design speeds.
Yep.
For improvements to existing roads, the design speed should be derived from the measured speeds, regardless of the posted speed limit. Yeah?
Yes.
So when one takes all of that guidance all together, I'm just going to put it to you that HCC are right to be requiring site stopping distances in accordance with DMRB and visibility displays.
Their guidance is very clear. As you say, 60. Manual for streets applies to, we'll take the 37.5, and I can take you to references on that. But what I would say is, in my view, these features will bring the speed down below the 37.5 anyway. So in my view, manual for streets is still appropriate because it will be below the 60 kilometers per hour. However, that's not what's been done. It's been done to DMRB guidance, and that's been the starting position. So whether or not that's my view, it's not what it's been designed to. I believe the visibility could be relaxed quite significantly because I do believe you will be below 37.5 miles per hour with these physical features. So in my opinion, manual seat still applies even if we take 60 kilometers per hour references you just going to.
And that is a difference between us. It's a difference between you and the HCC guidance, but you've made your points, and Ms. Backhouse has explained why she thinks it should be designed to a particular distance. And I don't think we're going to get very much further going around the houses on. The inspector has your point, and he can form his own view. Yeah.
Yes.
Fine. Okay. Now, when we take the distances, the visibility displays that HCC have asked be worked to, derived from HCC's calculator, there's common ground, isn't there? That we've got manoeuvre 1 and manoeuvre 2, where there are temporary obstructions, which in essence are caused by the spacing between the two accesses and vehicles turning. Yeah. And you've very helpfully, if I may, set out and explained in clear words those two manoeuvres, 4.36 and 4.37 of your proof of evidence. And I'm just going to look at those a little bit with you now. We've gone through them a lot. I'm not going to do loads on it because, you've had your say, Ms. Backhouse has had her say on it already. But we'll just go through them a little bit if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
Okay. And I think we know what's going on in manoeuvre 1. It's the vehicle turning right into Two-Gate Meadow, and it's having its visibility reduced. I think the visibility reduction is just below 80 meters. And the first point that you make is that it is a relatively temporary reduction. Yeah.
Yes, it's a fraction of a second. That car is in that. Literally a fraction of a second.
And depending on what vehicle was blocking it, whether it was a car, a van, or whatever, but it would remain a temporary obstruction.
It would remain a temporary obstruction. Why the vehicle is in that right turn, which we've already discussed, is a very small period of time and a very infrequent manoeuvre. And that temporary obstruction would then be in the road where a vehicle could be obstructed for literally a fraction of a second.
And we've gone into probabilities. We've gone into, whether the modelling was done as it should be. Ultimately, I don't think there's anything between us that the obstructions are temporary ones, and they will occur relatively infrequently.
Yes.
Whether one says that's a probability of whatever, or Ms. Backhouse has her concerns about the modelling, I don't think we need to go there, because we can agree temporary and we can agree relatively infrequent.
We can agree temporary and we can agree, I will say, extremely infrequent.
Fine.
Yes,
Well,
infrequent.
Fine. I want to then move on from that issue. And one of the points you make in your evidence is that the right turning driver would be looking ahead when making the manoeuvre.
Predominantly, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the driver would be looking ahead to some extent, but it's right to recognise, isn't it, that there would be other things to consider for a driver undertaking that manoeuvre. You would want to check the mouth of the junction. You'd want to check the pedestrian crossing. You'd want to check pedestrians crossing the mouth of the junction. So one wouldn't just be looking ahead. One would be looking around and taking account of your surroundings.
So before I answer that, can I just clarify, we're talking about the right turn into Two-Gate Meadow, that bit?
Yeah. Sorry, of course we are. Manoeuvre 1, yeah.
So that's still looking ahead. That's still looking ahead. The pedestrian crossings are in front of me as a driver there. The junctions from the new junction to Two-Gate Meadow is in front of me as there. So I accept the driver will look around and won't be just solidly think ahead, but he's predominantly looking ahead to take in all those manoeuvres you just said.
Okay. The next thing I want to look at is this issue of, well, the driver into Two-Gate Meadow would just wait to see what what following one the one ahead would do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now it may be that the driver ahead isn't waiting for a car travelling into Overton. It may be waiting for some other reason. So that there is no reason why that driver would necessarily wait. They'd make their own judgment, wouldn't they?
So I'm not quite sure why they would wait other than for a car, unless we're talking the incredibly infrequent use of that crossing, and it was waiting because someone was crossing the road across the fight access. And in that case, the driver waiting can see that pedestrian manoeuvre anyway and understand why they're waiting.
Yeah, but it's not how infrequent that would occur and why they might be waiting. Is that the one behind wouldn't necessarily know why they were waiting and would just form their own view. So they might think it's clear for me to go, I'm going to go, and that might turn out to be wrong.
The only reason for that car to wait and not turn right is if a pedestrian is walking across the access of new site access. Now, every pedestrian in Two-Gate Meadow is better off crossing at the western island, and to do with the sports ground, and every pedestrian on our site is better crossing at the eastern island. So that's the one in front of you. Once they cross there, they're better off staying on the eastern side of the footway. There's no reason to cross that access. So for someone to make that manoeuvre, that pedestrian movement across the entrance of our there's no reason to do it. It's been accommodated. So we're talking about a person that's going to do this, but I can't even think of why they're doing it. I really can't.
It's not about the frequency of that occurrence. It's not about whether the pedestrian is actually crossing. The point is that the driver behind won't know why the person at the new access is waiting. And so they might just make their own assumption.
Well, I disagree with you, because it is about it occurs. This may never occur in a year, this pedestrian moving across here. And that driver, if it does occur, you can see on that drawing, the driver can see them walking across the road, so they can see why they're waiting. So they would know it's for that occasion. And we can't take out of context, that car turning right is there for less than 6 seconds. Less than 6 seconds. That's nothing. So I don't think we do have to keep it in context. But you're talking about a manoeuvre other than the car that may literally never occur in a year.
Oh, no. Forgive me. I don't want you to be. I'm not saying that one should take it out of context at all. I'm saying that when one is considering this issue, why somebody in front of me is waiting to turn right into the site access, you're not necessarily aware of why that is. It may be there's no pedestrian. It may be they're waiting for another reason. It may be the driver behind doesn't necessarily know. It's not about the frequency of the currents. It's about the driver behind making their own mind up. That's my point.
The driver behind can clearly see what's going on ahead of them. You can see that on the drawing. The driver that's in that visibility display is there for less than 6 seconds before it makes the manoeuvre, and the area that is obscured from that driver is less than a second. So when they pull up to make the manoeuvre into Two-Gate Meadows, they can see beyond that driver and they can see in front of that driver. The minute they actually register that blind spot is significantly less than a second. So after they've just pulled up, that blind spot doesn't really exist in reality. You've seen beyond it, you've seen in advance of it, you can see any pedestrians, you can see any movements in the road. Your natural position to turn right is looking ahead on the road. You can see everything in front of you. And then when you put that all in context with the frequency, essentially you do that, this really is not an issue.
Within your evidence, you say that the vehicle, I was assured there wouldn't be noise today, forgive me. You say that a vehicle travelling westbound could stop if the right turn car pulled out.
Yes.
Yeah.
That deals with the absolute emergency that someone does something completely stupid, completely irrational. There is sufficient distance within the highway code to undertake an emergency stop. So it's perfectly and more than sufficient. But we're talking the absolutely, I cannot see it happening scenario, but its visibility is there to allow you to stop within the highway, an emergency stop. You shouldn't be designing for that.
We shouldn't be designing it for that, absolutely. We can agree that.
It's quite all right. I'm okay if everyone else is.
Well, I'm afraid it's not good at all, but there we are. I'll try and sort it out over the lunch adjournment. I haven't got very much longer to go. The point about this is that one shouldn't be designing it on that basis, should we? We shouldn't be wanting to design it so that the person with right of way travelling westbound has to undertake a stop manoeuvre, an emergency stop manoeuvre. They're not going to be expecting doing it.
No, I would never design a junction, and this junction hasn't either been designed to rely on emergency stop. What I am saying is, God forbid, all these scenarios everyone's saying are all happening, and God forbid the person turning right is a complete idiot that does it. The car coming along the road into Overton has more than adequate space to stop, way over in excess of the emergency braking distance in the highway code. So I'm saying that scenario is covered if it has to be, but no, I'm not saying it's designed for that, and it hasn't been designed for that, and I would never design for that.
Thank you. That's very fair. I want to then move on to manoeuvre 2, if I may. Second manoeuvre, we've got a similar issue, and the issues are similar between us, I think, so one can take it pretty quickly, just so that we know what we're doing. This time, the vehicle providing the obstruction is the one waiting to turn into Two-Gate Meadow.
Yes.
Yeah, and the vehicle waiting to pull out of the new site access is the one where the visibility is being obscured.
Yes.
Obstructed. And it, again, put a similar point to you, if I may. There's no particular reason why the person with reduced visibility would wait for the one turning into Two-Gate Meadow to clear, is there?
No particular reason why it waits. It could choose to edge out if it wanted to see further along the road, but in reality, that one turning into Two-Gate Meadow is there for seconds, literally a few seconds. And further, that you can't, the chances are, if that car can't turn right into the junction, you can't pull out because there's a car coming along the road anyway. So if the car's heading westbound into Overton, it's preventing the car turning out of our site access. The minute it goes past, the car will turn into Two-Gate Meadow, freeing up the visibility. This is all within seconds. We're not talking minutes sitting here. We're talking seconds. So there's absolutely no reason for it to push out into the road. But if it wants to, it could edge out, and then all of a sudden it can see the required visibility down the road anyway, on the opposite side. So if it wishes to nudge out, it could do. But it's really not necessary. And the chances are, if that car's waiting to turn right, there's a car coming into Overton, therefore it can't nudge out anyway.
And similarly, you said, oh, well, it'll be a car going into Overton. It could well be a pedestrian manoeuvre, which means a pedestrian movement, which means that vehicle waiting to Two-Gate Meadow is waiting. It may have nothing to do with a vehicular movement into Overton.
So we're talking about 39 properties that might have a pedestrian walking across the Two-Gate access to get back to their property, having gone to the sports ground. Well, yeah, it could wait. It could wait for that, and that's more. There's more probability in that than the last pedestrian movement discussed. However, it's still incredibly infrequent.
It's not, with respect, it's not just 39 properties. One needs to be careful about that, about describing that access. It's not just 39 properties it serves. It would be a route through into the development.
No, the development, you wouldn't take that as a logical route. I thought we'd already discussed that and agreed that, and between myself and Miss Backhouse, I thought we'd accepted Route 2 was the logical route, and in her evidence, and the only real logical reason to use those crossings was for actually the sports facilities.
Sorry, I'm turning my microphone off to try and keep you all from the sound. I'm very sorry about this. I must stop this. Sorry. Very sorry, sir. I spoke to the builders at 7:30 this morning. I said, is it going to be a quiet day? And they said, yes, there's no banging, and they're currently banging directly behind my head. So I'm just going to go and ask them to stop. My wife is anyway. Forgive me, pedestrian routes. Yes, absolutely. There are a variety of routes, but the Two-Gate Meadow junction, just so that we're clear.
Yes.
Serves the Two-Gate Meadow development. Yeah.
Yes.
One can also get onto Two-Gate Lane from it, can't you?
You can go down Two-Gate Lane, yes.
Yeah, and that goes through, doesn't it, we can look, but that goes through to other parts of Overton. It's a way, for example, it's a way through into the centre. It happens as the way I went when I walked the site.
It does, but it's a narrow road without any footpaths on it. So if people are walking to their residential properties, they're far better than going down from the very down playing fields. They're better off going down the main road and then cutting through.
One just needs to be a little bit careful, doesn't one, in saying it's an access purely for that cul-de-sac.
I would stand corrected on that. You are right that there are additional properties beyond that may choose to use it, but I would suggest they are absolutely minuscule numbers.
Okay, well, we don't need to get in particularly to the precise numbers. I just wanted to make it clear that it's not right to say it's just 2 Gate Meadow. So that is the manoeuvre, and then again, there's this suggestion within your evidence that an eastbound vehicle could stop in the highway.
Again, same point. I'm not suggesting we design to that at all. But
No.
absolutely worst case, someone does an idiot manoeuvre, and you've got to allow for idiots occasionally, I suppose. There is more than ample forward room along the road to do an emergency stop at the highway code. So,
Yeah.
and by more than enough, I mean it's something like double or something like that. So it's more than safe that you wouldn't have that incident. But you shouldn't design for that, and I would never design for that. And this has not designed for that.
No, we really shouldn't be. We shouldn't be saying, oh well, it's okay. And fairly, I understand that that's not what you're saying, but someone can do an emergency stop. That's not good enough, is it?
It's good enough to. It's good. It's worth bearing in mind if we're talking about this one-off idiot. Then yes, it is important to know that they still won't have a conflict, because we seem to keep straying from the fact that we need to bear in mind the occurrence of all these, the frequency of all these manoeuvres, and the duration of all these manoeuvres, and they're also minuscule. And for them all to occur at the same time it's not really a likely event. So I'm just going that next step further and saying if all that happens, they can still safely stop.
Can I just deal with another point on visibility and standards of visibility?
Yeah.
The technical note at junction design, the core document 29 that we looked at.
Yep.
One of the documents that is relied on in there. This is the point at which the previous consultants are seeking to satisfy HCC that the reductions in visibility, temporary as they are okay. Yeah.
Yes.
And one of the documents they point to is a visibility research document, an Atkins document.
They do, and the Highway Authority didn't accept it.
Didn't accept it.
They acknowledged that it could be the case, but still felt that it should be designed in accordance with standards, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably is a way to short circuit it, this issue. But have you had a look at that Atkins for Highways England document?
Not in detail, no.
Okay, can I just take you to a little bit of it then? Because, do you rely on it in any way? Perhaps I'll put it this way.
No, I don't. No.
Fine. Okay. Can I put it to you that they were wrong? PJA were wrong to rely on it in trying to persuade the Highways Authority that the reductions were acceptable here.
No, I don't think they were wrong to rely on it. Sorry. I think the point they were trying to make, and I'd have to go back to the technical notes where they reference it. I think the point they were trying to make from the top of my head was a fair point to make, but it's this document itself is for Highways England, and I personally would rely on it in this situation.
Okay, fine. Well, if you are maintaining that it was a fair point to make, then I just want to, so the inspector has the point, see what that document actually says about Ghost Island junctions. So 3.3.6 of the technical note, please, which is core document 29.
Yes, no, I'm there.
3.3.6,
which is on page 7.
oh, sorry. I must have the wrong doc. We were talking about CD61.
We'll go there. Sorry, I just wanted to introduce it by, you said, do I need to go to where?
Sorry.
So core document 29, forgive me.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
No, not your fault, mine.
3.3.6. Yeah.
Introduction is the Atkins Highways England document.
Yeah.
And they give the conclusion at 3.3.8, level of compliance with wide visibility compared with collision rates. And then they underline, in general, the graphs do not indicate any clear relationship between collision rates and decreasing level of non-compliance with the wide visibility requirements. Okay?
Yes.
So that's the conclusion that they're reporting to HCC at the time.
Yes.
And then 3.9, they produce a table, figure 4.8 from that document.
Yep.
See that table?
Yes.
And that is a table, if one looks at the top of it, which applies to simple junctions. Yeah.
Yes.
So it wasn't a very sensible table for them to produce, because we're not dealing with a simple junction here. We've got Ghost Island junction. Yeah.
I'd have to look at the definition of simple junction, because that, but I suspect that's the case, doesn't it?
Okay. We'll look at that together in a second then.
I suspect you're right, but I would have to double check.
No. So what HCC were being asked to draw from that document, Atkins document, and what I appreciate that you don't rely on it yourself now, but just to put into context what PJA were telling the Highways Authority is that the Atkins research didn't show any clear relationship between collision rates and decreasing levels of non-compliance with the wide visibility requirements. I just wanted to pick up what is actually said about Ghost Islands in core document 61.
Yeah. Okay.
Just because it isn't reported, wasn't reported to them. I don't know if they had this full document in front of them, Highways Authority. So the report then, let's just try and go through this quickly. 4.3 of that document on page 17, please, first.
Yes, got it.
I think one can see general wide visibility requirements, and we see how it's worked out: pass failure, left-right failure, left-hand, right-hand failure. And we see below in figure 4.6, simple, ghost, and SLD are the three types of junctions that it looks at.
Yeah, but they have differentiated between, so yes.
Yeah, okay. And then if one looks over the page 18, what's actually said about Ghost Islands.
Yes.
Page 18, just so that we have this in front of the inquiry. For Ghost Island junctions, the collision rate is lower for junctions that fully comply with the wide visibility requirements than those that do not. Well, there's very little difference between the collision rates for failure categories. So that depends on whether it's a left failure, right failure, or a left and right failure. The key finding for Ghost Island junctions is that where there is full compliance, the junction performs better. Yeah, so actually, just so that we're clear as to what the Atkins document that PJA had relied upon says about Ghost Islands, contrary to the position with junctions generally, it's identifying that Ghost Island junctions perform better where there's full compliance with wide visibility requirements.
For the Highway England junctions, yes.
Yeah, fine.
The reason I said I don't rely on it, but I understood the point they were trying to make, and I think they could have made it better, is Manual for Streets does say if you over provide for visibility, I have to find the reference to it, but if you over provide, it can actually make people do manoeuvres they shouldn't, and sometimes it's actually better to reduce visibility down. But I don't think that was a good example to give, and I would accept that.
Yeah, fine. Okay, thank you. And fair, I take the point you don't rely on it, but it's in the evidence. And I just wanted to correct that. So thank you for bearing with me on that. Pedestrian visibility then, and I'm afraid I've run massively over my time, but we will still finish pretty promptly, I hope. We've looked at point B a few times. You've clarified the waiting time, I think, of 1 or 2 seconds now on your measurements. And we see the obstruction 5.4 of Ms. Backhouse's proof of evidence, which is page 46.
Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to find.
Yeah.
That's the trouble when you. Yes, sorry, I've got that. Yes.
No, yeah, maybe the one benefit of working electronically is you don't bury your papers, albeit you do lose them on PDF screens. If a pedestrian were waiting to cross using the pedestrian island, we've looked at the necessary visibility to see traffic approaching from the east along the B3400, impeded by a vehicle waiting to turn right into the proposed access. And one factor to take into account in this reduction in visibility is, of course, that these are pedestrians that might well be returning from the youth club sports club, albeit accompanied children or whatever it might be, as Mr. Warren.
Yes, yeah, they could be accompanied children there. Yes, and actually, it's likely they may well be accompanied children. If it's not likely to be a frequent movement, but of those that do occur, I think it's reasonable to assume that there's a good likelihood there could be a child. Yes.
Yeah, and perhaps not from your proposed development, or not so frequently from your proposed development, because we've looked at the fact that they might cross using the other crossing.
Yep.
But accessing Two-Gate Meadow, for example.
Yes, so it would be accessing Two-Gate Meadow. Yes, and of course it is only it doesn't affect the northbound movement, and it affects 1/2 of the southbound movement. So if you like, 25% of the movement's crossing. And
one of the points you made in your rebuttal is, well, Ms. Backhouse makes the point, but it wasn't identified in the road safety audit. You say that 5.18 of your rebuttal, yeah?
Yes.
Can I just put it to you that one of the reasons it might well have not been identified in the road safety audit is because they were working to that design speed of 30 miles an hour that we looked at previously?
No, because the auditor would have to take into account highway safety irrespective of that, and 30 mile an hour, it would still be restricted in the visibility display by that car. So it would just be a different visibility display.
It would be a substantially different visibility display, wouldn't it?
It would be different, yes.
It would be something like 40 meters rather than 80 meters, I think.
I'd have to double check, but yes. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
I think so. So it's a substantially different consideration, which may explain why it wasn't picked up in the road safety audit.
No, I don't agree, because as I said, the auditor will take into account the circumstances they believe would be on the road. So if they believe that the vehicles will be doing in excess of 30, irrespective of the speed limit changing, they will take that into account. The speed limit isn't a physical measure. It's a legal measure that unfortunately too many people ignore, but it's not a physical measure. They take into account what's being proposed and the reality of how that will change circumstances. I'm not saying they won't have had also in their mind that it was proposed to be a 30, because they will, but that won't be, they won't assume everyone's doing 30. And sorry, I did just check, it's 40 meters, you are correct.
The other point you make is that one should rely on the pedestrian waiting until it's safe to cross, yeah?
Well, in my experience, pedestrians tend to wait rather than step in front of cars when they can't see, particularly when that car's only there for a few seconds, especially if they've got children with them, where they're going to be more careful of the child with them. So it's my experience, people don't tend to step out into the road if they can't see.
But they might well get to the position where they think it's safe to go, and they haven't seen that car approaching, and that's the risk that we're dealing with, and that's why temporary obstructions like this are problematic, I suggest to you.
But we just discussed that they can see beyond that car. That car obstruction is at a 40 mile an hour road. If it doesn't change, and we say it doesn't change the speed limit then, and nothing changes, the cars carry on doing what they're doing, we're saying that it passes through there in 1.5 seconds. So when the pedestrian arrives, looks down the road, it can see beyond the car. That visibility display is only obscured for 1.5 seconds. After that, you know what's approaching that visibility display, a blind spot, and what goes beyond it. I'm sorry, but you're only then talking up to 6 seconds and the car moves into the junction. So it's not even there. So the reality is, pedestrians, let's put this in, put it in another context. At signal control junctions where you ask pedestrians to wait, they comfortably wait for 90 and 120 seconds. Try not to do more than 120 seconds, so 2 minutes. Because after 2 minutes, pedestrians usually won't wait and they get twitchy and they move on. And you ideally go for 90 seconds rather than 120. That's a signal junction. That's standard stuff. If you get it down to 60 seconds, well and good. But so it's not unusual for pedestrians to wait those times, and I accept they're signal control junctions, but they can still cross between the flows where the opportunity arrives. Here, we're asking a pedestrian to wait seconds. We're not even talking 10 seconds. So I don't think it's unreasonable for pedestrians to want to wait rather than take their life in their hands, as you're suggesting, and step out when they can't see, because they won't be doing that. Beyond the vehicle they can see, in front of the vehicle they can see, and once they've been there for 1.5 seconds, they can see, they know what's in that black spot as well, that blind spot. We're talking minuscule. And then, as I said, you've got to put it in context with the number of movements, the number of pedestrian movements, and the rarity of the two things occurring.
Any more? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
All right. I'm going to move on, please, to the right turn lane geometry. And again, we basically know what's between us now. We've got a situation where you begin in 4.8 of your proof by citing the DMRB guidance as the Department for Transport document, which contains the relevant guidance for a right turn lane. Yeah.
Yes.
And there isn't equivalent guidance in Manual for Streets or Manual for Streets 2, which gives different geometry, is there?
No, you would use that same guidance whether the road had been 20 mile an hour or 70 mile an hour.
And then what we see, if we look at figure 6.3, I think it's that's in your proof, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Let me just turn that up, working from my note. 6.3, you explain very helpfully that the geometry of the right hand lane junction is made up of a turning length plus a queuing length required, and the deceleration length, which I think we know includes a taper.
Yes.
And for a 40 mile an hour standard, that would be a deceleration length of 40 meters with a turning length of 10 meters. Yeah.
On a trunk road, yes. Yeah.
Well, yeah, on the standard that's set out in DMRB.
Yeah, for trunk road. Yeah. That's an important caveat. I'm sorry, but the standards are designed for trunk roads and guidance for everything else. But yes, it's 40 plus 10. I agree.
Yeah, and the figures, we also get figures, don't we, for a 30 mile per hour standard, which we've got 10 meters and 25 meter deceleration length.
Yes.
Giving 35 meters total, and that is a little bit less than what's been provided. I think it's been measured about 36 meters, hasn't it?
Yeah. So yeah.
And if one thinks about the reason why the deceleration length would reduce between 40 miles per hour and a 30 mile an hour design speed, that's related to the time it takes to stop at those speeds, isn't it?
It's related to, and it's really, you've got to go back to what I was saying about the difference between a trunk road and this type of road. It's designed to allow the car to pull off into the right turn lane at a reasonable speed before it slows down, so as not to encumber the vehicles behind and cause congestion or shunts, rear end shunts from braking and the rest. On trunk roads like motorways, etc., motorways, for example, A roads, right turns, you don't expect to see people braking in front of you to make, or slowing you expect the speeds to be fairly continuous, and then you move into the right turn lane. Here, the situation is completely different. Slow in advance of the right turn lane. That's why I said you must differentiate between this is the guidance that you would design to the DMRB in front roads, and it's guidance only for local roads, as indeed the Highway Authority has accepted.
But the question was the difference is related to the difference between is the two is related to the time it takes to decelerate.
It is. That was designed for trunk roads where you're trying not to slow the vehicle behind, where you don't decelerate as you approach the junction. On a standard urban road where you put these in, you decelerate in advance of them. So there is a, you know, you've got to bear in mind there is guidance and flexibility here. And there's plenty of times where I've looked at the capacity of roads and the number of movements in the right turn lane and reduced it down myself in accordance with similar designs to this. So I've done exactly the same myself. In fairness, I've got exactly the same design going on now.
Reducing it on the basis of a queue length isn't what the deceleration length is about, is it? So the queue length is a separate issue if one needs to provide it, yeah?
So the queue length is the turning length, and that's shown as 10 metres or can be extended depending on the queues predicted in the modelling. And you are entirely right, the deceleration length, which also includes the direct taper length, is what you use to slow down to join the back of the queue. So you move off the carriageway at relatively high speed into the right turn lane, and then use that to slow down to join the back of the traffic. That's what it's designed for a trunk road.
You use it to slow down to make the turn, don't you?
I mean, no, to join in a trunk road, you join the back of the traffic because normally there'd be a queue to turn right, and then you move in from that deceleration lane into the turning length, and it's the turning length you use to make the manoeuvre. And it's designed to keep the free flow of traffic. On this type of road, you will be decelerating as you approach the junction before you even get to the right turn lane.
But there's a turning length of 10 metres. That's the area in which you undertake your manoeuvre. You turn in, yeah?
Yes. And
possibly queue if there are one or two cars. But if it's a more significant queue, one is to provide a greater turning length, or an additional length.
It's the turning length you increase, yes. So the turning length is 10 metres plus so for a trunk road you religiously pretty much design it at 10 metres plus any modelled additional queue length as part of that turning length, and then the deceleration length is on top of that.
So the absence of excessive queuing here, we don't say there would be excessive queuing, but the absence of that doesn't justify any reduction in the deceleration lane, does it?
Yes, yeah, because for starters, the absence of queuing means I've got no more than one vehicle in there, which means I've actually only taken 5 metres of that 10 metres for starters. So I've actually got a spare 5 metres of the turning length, for instance. Which can be used for deceleration. But the point is, neither of them really matter because you slow in advance of the right turn lane. Normal driving behaviour is you're going up the hill, you're approaching Two-Gate Meadow or outside access, whichever one you want. Here we're on about outside access, and you will start to slow and turn right into it. You are not going to, no driver in their right mind is going to whiz up the hill at 40 miles an hour, swerve into the right turn lane, and then suddenly try to stop. You just don't do it. You slow your movement. It's normal driving behaviour. I think we have to realise the rationale of how drivers drive on trunk roads is completely different to the behaviour on the local roads. And the design is done of DMRB is to keep the free flow and movement of traffic. We don't need that on urban roads like this. We expect people to slow. It's safer for people to slow.
Okay, well, there's a fundamental difference between you and Ms. Backhouse on that point. I think we've explored it.
I feel Ms. Backhouse is just blindly quoting DMRB without any context for the surroundings, to be quite honest.
The final point I want to deal with you is the design speed of the Overton Hill junction, because it's one that I think you've raised
Yes.
in your evidence, and maybe that Ms. Backhouse referred to it as well. One can't extrapolate very much from that, can we, in terms of the design when we're thinking about the safe design of this junction?
Yes, we can.
Well, okay, fine. Let's break it down then. You say that it was designed to the 30-mile-an-hour guidance, and you've measured that on the site, yeah?
Yes.
And it's right to say that Overton Hill junction is within the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, isn't it?
Yes. And
you've referred to the ATC locations from this this junction from our application, our appeal.
Yes.
But those locations aren't suitable for the assessment of speeds at Overton Hill junction, are they?
So the speed I was particularly had in mind was the ATC, the most westerly ATC heading into Overton, where people would be coming down the hill. I would expect them to slow from the speed that I recorded, and Mr. Stackhouse helpfully provided information that recorded speed was 36 miles per hour for the junction that was designed. They recorded 36 miles per hour. Now, if it's 36 miles per hour and you blindly follow DMRB, you up it to 40 mile an hour and you design it to a 40 mile an hour geometry. You up it, you don't come down. So the junction's been designed for 30 in terms of its layout, and that's quite right to do so. Look at the appropriateness of people slowing before they move in, and that obviously that judgment was gone through at that time. It also serves considerably more houses than us, so you've got a lot more weight, a lot more delay, and a lot more likelihood of more than one vehicle there. So again, and when you look at the accident record for that, I went back 10 years. There's not been one incident in 10 years. So I think it's very relevant to say that a junction where the speeds are clearly in excess of 30 miles an hour, that it's a layout that would have called with 30 miles an hour in terms of general guidance, hasn't got one accident. I think it's very relevant.
The 36 mile an hour speed limit, that would fall within manual for streets, wouldn't it? The 36 miles per hour recorded speed we looked at that earlier. That's the 60 kilometre per hour that we looked at.
It would indeed, but as we both referred to earlier, and I think we both agreed that DMRB right turn lane is the only guidance available. There is none in that design. Sorry, if I may, in the design and layout for a right turn lane, and therefore you have to refer to the guidance in the design manual for roads and streets. And that's where you start your position, and then it's guidance on that position. So they chose to relax it.
But with respect, we're dealing with a different. I mean, the inspector will have to form his own view on site. But if one goes to that access, it's a different situation. It's far more in the village. It has, even with your proposed measures, it is far more of an urban road than where we are, and where we will be, even with your new site access. It's a different situation.
So it's a different situation in terms of it's more into the village, but the left-hand side still has vegetation as you drive into the village all the way along it, similar to us. The right-hand side, the houses are set back as you approach them as well. So it's not significantly different in terms of character and I would ask the inspector to look at that. It is different, but it's not significantly different to what we're creating. So I still maintain that's a good example of how a geometry that actually accords with a 30 rather than houses between 30 and 40 design, but a geometry that accords with 30 works perfectly well, knowing the approach speeds are in excess of 30 and there's no accident. And when we refer to manual streets, that would be about visibility displays, forward visibility, site stopping distances. As I've said previously, and I'll say it again, DMRB is the only guidance when it comes to the right turn lane in terms of the geometry layout, and we use that as guidance location.
Now, in terms of just looking at that access, and the inspector will see on site, but that there is frontage development right by the Overton Hill access, isn't there? There are the new build houses that, albeit they are set back from the access, they're clearly the clear feel is that you're in an more urban location than at the site access there.
So those houses are set back, and as I said, the character is not identical, and it is slightly more urban. But the left-hand side, as you drive down the road, is very wooded, rural in nature, and the right-hand side, you don't see the properties. The properties set back begin more when you're approaching the right turn lane itself. You've actually so as you drive down the road, properties are so far set back, and I'd invite the inspector to look when he is on site. You have to be thinking about that right turn manoeuvre when you see the property. So there's nothing to influence the driver in advance of that right turn lane in terms of speed. So I think the character is not dissimilar.
Well, what is in advance is that one is, rather than leaving a 30 mile an hour where someone would tend to be speeding up anyway, and we know they're already speeding. One has come in through into the 30 mile an hour area there, and one would naturally, as one saw the development approaching, be slowing down. So it's a different situation.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because isn't that not the situation we've got? So as you come out of the village and you see the development approaching in the right turn lanes, you slow down because as you look down. I'd invite the inspector to stand at the Two-Gate Meadow junction and walk down the road, and you cannot see those properties. All you see is two hedge lines all the way down into the village until you're right on top of that Overton Hill right turn lane. It's a shame we can't share screens, because if I could, I'd just show you on Google Maps, but you'll see it on site very clearly. And the recorded speed going by, and I've no reason to doubt it, from this back house was 36 miles per hour, just over 36 miles per hour. Therefore, if you were blindly following DMRB, which you shouldn't, if you were, that would have been designed to a 40 mile an hour right turn lane. It hasn't been. It's been designed to a 30. Someone's taken a pragmatic approach and applied the appropriate standards and relaxation in accordance with the guidance.
Well, I've put to you the differences between it, and again, it's another issue where you and Ms. Backhouse are apart. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you very much for your patience, and thank you everybody for bearing with the drilling. I hope it won't carry on this afternoon, but I'll move to a different room.
That's all right, Sophia. It didn't cause any problems. If you'll just wait there, Mr. Burbidge, I do have a few questions, I think, that have occurred to me, although some of those have been answered as we've been going along. One aspect I'm perhaps a little, if you'll help me on, I appreciate, obviously, your scheme has been designed with the speed limit in the position that it is at the moment. And obviously there was some considerable discussion, as we have seen from looking at historical documents, about changing that so that pushing it further eastwards. And at one point the Highway Authority appeared to be willing to consider that, but at latter stages they took the view that actually was unlikely to be something that they would be willing to agree to. Can you just explain to me why they took that view, why you've taken an opposite view to them?
The reason I've taken an opposite is it's not logical to leave this where it is. It's more, speed limits usually relate to a position where speed limits are better where they relate to something visually, so you can see there's a clear delineation between why you're dropping 30, 40, 50, or whatever. So there's a logic to relocating that speed limit to the gateways, because you've got a physical feature at the start of some of the urbanisation. So there's a logic moving it, and I think that's something we need to pursue, and should pursue, and will be pursued. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. But what I would categorically say, and as important, perhaps more importantly, is the county council don't have an objection with remaining where it is. So it's more a case of, I think, logically.
Yeah, but I understand. Well, why is it that the Highway Authority don't take that view?
I only know from what Miss Backhouse said, and in evidence she gave the other day, she said they didn't feel that it would meet the criteria for the 40 in terms of sufficient speed reduction. 30, sorry, for sufficient speed reduction. I believe that's her words.
Yeah, so even if it were to be moved, people would still not obey it. They would continue to drive at speeds higher. Is that effectively what?
I think that's a reasonable assumption to make, sir. I think I've said in evidence, I'm not going to pretend for 1 minute if you put 30 there, people will do 30 through there. I think, unfortunately, I hate to say it, the 85th percentile will be lower than it is now, but probably above 30 in my professional judgment. And that's the same judgment the road safety also would have taken on site, what they believe to be the realistic speeds rather than the reality of, rather than the legality.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I think I have that one. Good. Okay, no, I think that's everything that I need to ask. Mr. Warren, do you have any questions in re-examination?
I don't, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Beveridge.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Burbidge. Okay, do we have anything else as far as highway issues are concerned from anybody else who is attending the inquiry? I see no hands. So on that basis, I think it's an appropriate time then to break for lunch. And so I'll adjourn the inquiry and we'll resume at 2 o'clock. The inquiry is adjourned. Thank you.